December, really. That's the mantra at the moment. Good morning, welcome to SFM, welcome to SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Only once so far today have I looked at the calendar to see how many working days left. Only once. I'm sure by the end of the day I'll have done it twice more, and I'm sure I won't be the only one. Anyway, I wonder how you are after the weekend. I wonder how you are sort of getting everything together. I know so many people who just have so many events at the moment, they can't cram it all in, partly because of, children, partly because this has to be done, that has to be done, this project. I'd hoped to do this by the end of the year and it hasn't happened, that kind of feeling, that kind of end of year rush. And in my family now, my daughter has finished exams and my poor son still has exams. And can you imagine being him with a younger sister on at you? Nah. And everyone tries to be nice to each other and all the rest. But as a parent, I can't tell you I'll be so relieved when exams are over. I find it very, very stressful. I think everybody does, actually. I think that's sort of part of it. Maybe we should be finding our children's exams stressful. Maybe that's how it's supposed to work. I think maybe it is. I think your weekend probably marked, I'm afraid, by load shedding. Stage 6 load shedding on a weekend. What's the phrase? Nochal? Yes, on a weekend, nochal. I mean, incredible, really, that this still happens and that it's still so bad. And I see that the Minister for Electricity and the Presidency, Josienso Ramakopa, having to basically say, no, we didn't go to stage 8. And I think that came because in some places you just get switched off and you just sort of give up on electricity for the weekend when you hear it's going to be stage 6, don't you? It's been interesting to see how people have played it because where I live in Joburg, City Power supposedly taken over the load shedding. And you just find that no one's sticking to rosters. We'll speak to Isaac Mangena in a little while. I think that City Power may be a sort of symptom of some of the other problems. And one of the questions I want to ask, and only struck me this morning after looking at my calendar, was whether or not when you have load shedding more often, in other words, you're switching the thing off more often, which means that there's less time between load shedding, but it also means that you get a chance to recharge everything and all the rest. But does that also mean that does it reduce theft? Because you want to, if you're going to go and steal something, you want a good 4-hour stretch of load shedding to go and steal that cable. And if you don't have that now, if you only have 2 hours, does it actually reduce theft? It's one of the things, if you don't use infrastructure, it gets stolen. That's for railway lines and that's for power cables. If you do use it, it's less likely to get stolen. And then the other thing I must just tell you, it really defined my weekend, might have defined yours. In the north of the country, in the interior, I always feel sort of old-fashioned when I say the Highveld, but geographically that's what I mean. In terms of actual physical geography, it's just been so hot. Just so hot. I was looking at people. There was a children's birthday party yesterday and I was dropping my daughter off and I came back and I felt wilted and I suddenly realized everybody else around me looked wilted too. Just wilted, I think was the word. Just tired. And it was just the heat. I was just like, whoa. You want to get in a car just to use the air conditioning. It's been so hot. And I'd been expecting rain tomorrow over Gauteng, and it doesn't look like it, I'm afraid. That forecast has changed, and it's still going to be very hot today. And you're just like, whoa, wow. Can it really still be this hot for this long? And then the scary thing, I don't even want to think about it, but is this what we're going to have to get used to? This kind of temperature, with climate change and all the rest. Very, very scary. On Friday, the National Treasury issuing a statement, and banks getting involved in this too, about the currency manipulation case. And I sort of feel, we did a mediated conversation about it last week, and maybe it's so big we sort of need to do another one, or maybe some people will speak now who haven't. It's been quite difficult, and I'll tell you one of the problems of talking about the Rand manipulation story is that most of the people who are experts in currency trades have at some point worked for some of the banks. And that's a problem. So, that makes it harder to sort of find people who can talk to us about it. But maybe we need to do a little bit more work on that. The National Treasury saying that what happened with the currency manipulation had no impact on the long-term value of the Rand. And just a reminder, as the National Treasury said, this happened in New York really between 2007 and 2013. So it happened a long time ago. And the South African Reserve Bank, I didn't know this, but they actually did a technical paper in 2015. And they said then that there was no impact on the currency. So the Reserve Bank did do an investigation. And there's strange things about it. So Nedbank was added to the list of banks only 5 years after the investigation started. And then Sim Chabalala, who's the CEO of Standard Bank, very strongly, he's written a sort of opinion pieces in Business Day, I think it's in other places, And he says that they did nothing wrong. And then in his article, he says this. He says, we will not settle. And I thought that was interesting. We will not settle. He says they did nothing wrong. And so this gets to questions about what is actually going on with the investigation. And they're before the Competition Appeal Court, and they say there's no evidence they did anything wrong. Paul Mashatile, the Deputy President, he was talking over the weekend. He said we mustn't be soft on gender-based violence. Well, I mean, he's correct, but men who attack women. The question, of course, as we've discussed this many times, is that the legal system doesn't deal with them properly. And once again, we're back to this, how the criminal justice system and the NPA had their budgets reduced and the VIP protection unit had theirs increased. And in fact, I think in the Sunday Times, in the sort of any questions section, Shamila Batoyi said, I think I'd need to read it again, but I think she used the word disgusting, that the NPA's budget was cut and VIP, I think the VIP protection budget is 70% of the NPA's budget. And I think she was very upset. I think she's right to be, actually. And I'm quite careful about expressing too much opinion, but I think it's hard to justify in a country like this increasing the VIP budget, protection budget. Anyway, you tell me what you think. And then I thought this might be interesting. Alan Bussack mentioned over the weekend, he was speaking at an event focusing on, and these phrases are difficult, but people who identify as coloured, let me use that phrase. He said government should do away with racial classification. It sort of re-racializes society. I wonder how the rest of the ANC sees that. I don't think they'll be very pleased. But he said that we should do away with race classification. Lots to talk about this morning. Also, the ANC's nominations process. There's lots to talk about there. The number 086 000 2032, SMS 41391, tweet SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning, Monday morning. It's 13 after 6.
Buying a new TV? You'll need a paid-up TV license. Need to check your balance? No sweat at all. You just SMS your ID or TV license account number to 44210 for fast, effective balance inquiries. Secure your legal viewing fast and simple. Standard SMS rates will be charged. Terms and conditions apply. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Lisa, hope you're well. Listen, I went to this car heaven place We Buy Cars with Henriette to sell the caravans and the jet skis she must now got from the divorce because she's never going onto the Vaal River again, she says. So We Buy Cars bought it from her for a great price. Nobody, you should tell your husband to sell all of those project cars and take you to the Maldives. Or just give them a call because they come to your house and then they buy your car somewhere so on the spot where they're so gerieflik.
We Buy Cars, the best place to sell your car by far.
Did you hear that? That's the sound of lights being switched off to reduce the impact of load shedding. Eskom is encouraging you to use less electricity at all times by switching off electrical appliances and lights that are not in use. Cell phone chargers, TVs, and decoders still use electricity if they're not switched off at the socket. You see, if we all switch off what is not in use, our combined effort could help reduce the impact of load shedding. Let's work together by switching off to reduce load shedding.
Dressing up is a winning mentality.
If you look good, you do good.
You feel good too.
Big ups to Polo South Africa
for making the SABC Sport team look good during the Rugby World Cup France 2023. Class and style on another level.
Rolez-vous.
Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Leander Moyome, good morning. How are you doing?
Stephen, are you good?
I'm well, thank you. I'm just hot. I'm tired of it.
Goodness.
I'm just hot.
Yo, man, I don't know. I've suffered these past few days.
I've been too scared to
I
tell.
have suffered.
Too scared to tell my family that I'm going to sit in an air-conditioned studio.
You know what? I just think I can confirm now.
Yeah.
I love me some winter.
Do you?
I can't.
That's not what you said in July.
I cannot do this. I cannot do this. My goodness. Last night, man, sleeping was just it's been a mission.
And I just feel wilted during the day. I find it very hard to actually make decisions to do things.
So true.
Yeah.
But I feel particularly sad for the kids because I think most of them just don't understand what is happening. When they can't sleep at night. But hey, we are here, Stephen. Let's work, right?
What's happening today?
Today, Stephen, we'll hear from legal experts, political analysts, and of course, the parliamentary ethics expert about the EFF's legal bid to have the National Assembly Rules and Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislature Act declared unconstitutional. Now, the party launched an application with the Western Cape High Court to have the act declared unconstitutional. They've also launched a separate court application to interdict the sanctions against leader Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, Senao Tambo, and 3 other MPs pending the outcome of this first court decision.
This is all the storming of the stage at the State of the Nation.
Yes, this is relating to that storming of the stage at the SONA. So let's find out what happens there when that case actually gets to court. But for now, we'll be hearing from the experts in terms of what their prospects are. And also, Stephen, still in courts, the state is expected to call a new witness to the stand as the trial within a trial continues on the Senzo Mewa Meda case. The court is still seized, of course, with that examining the admissibility of those confession statements allegedly made by accused 1 and 2. Yeah, so let's find out what happens there today.
Very interesting.
And Stephen, we probe an alleged racial tensions that have been recently seen where a man has been killed and another wounded during a shooting incident at Legacy on the Dam Resort in Hartbeespoort in the Northwest Province. Now, resort owners have reportedly been fighting a long-standing quiet battle with members of the white community there who are allegedly against the establishment of a black-owned resort on a portion of land, of course, that is surrounded by those lush and affluent estates.
That's very interesting, very disturbing as well.
Very disturbing. So we'll be finding out exactly what is happening there. And back in court, Stephen, the alleged killer of Reverend Lizelf de Jager is to appear in the Durban Magistrates Court today, 2 years after her murder. You'd remember that de Jager's body was found at her home on 13 October 2021. Apparently, she was strangled. So let's find out what's happening in that one.
Yeah.
And Action SA leader Herman Mashaba will be starting a nationwide tour to inspect the country's borders. Mashaba believes there's a decay at the borders, hence there's an influx of undocumented foreign nationals. Could have stayed home and told him that. And finally, Stephen will have an exclusive interview with the spokesperson of the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Qatar on the role that Qatar have played in facilitating the agreement between Israel and Hamas, and how it kind of a bird's-eye view of that, those diplomatic channels that have been opened to try and get those parties to the table. So we'll be hearing from that as well.
It's fascinating. We're actually going to talk about that in just a moment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Leander Mahome, thank you very much indeed. We'll be listening on the radio 19 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country. Still very hot. If you think you're hot where you are, wait until we get to Uppington. Tshwane, partly cloudy, becoming partly cloudy, becoming cloudy with isolated showers and thundershowers in the evening, 21 and 34. Johannesburg, fine, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers later, 18 and 32. Vereeniging, fine, becoming partly cloudy, isolated thundershowers later, 20 and 35. Bombela, cloudy at first, isolated afternoon thundershowers, 20 and 32. Polokwane, fine, partly cloudy later, 21 and 32. Mahakeng, partly cloudy, isolated thundershowers, 23 and 37. Vryburg, partly cloudy, isolated thundershowers, 24 and 38. Mangung, fine, 20 and 38. Kimberley, fine, 23 and 40. Uppington, fine, 24 and 42. Cape Town, fine, a light to moderate southerly wind, 16 and 27. George, cloudy at first, becoming partly cloudy to fine by the afternoon, a light to moderate southerly wind, 15 and 25. Gqeberha, fine, becoming partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh southwesterly, 18 and 24. East London, fog patches in the morning, otherwise fine, a light to moderate southwesterly, 19 and 27. eThekwini, cloudy, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon, a light to moderate northerly wind, 21 and 28. Richards Bay, cloudy, becoming partly cloudy later, a light to moderate southerly, 24 and 28. And Pietermaritzburg, morning fog, otherwise partly cloudy, isolated showers and thundershowers, 19 and 30.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng. The theme of the lecture is Constitutionalism and Upholding the Rule of Law in South Africa. Has corruption and malfeasance eroded the moral fabric of the democratic dispensation? The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand. It's for our clever who turn 5-liter bottles into workout dumbbells. And for the slim oaks who bring a home-cooked skafteen to work every day. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand Station. Gautrain, for people on the move.
The Northwest Provincial Legislature Portfolio Committee on Economic Development, Environment and Tourism, Agriculture and Rural Development will conduct public hearings on Northwest Gambling Amendment Bill 2022 and Northwest Consumer Affairs Bill 2019 on 28 November 2023 at Barolombora Tlubakasitsiro Community Hall in Kunwana, Kakala Community Hall in New Dornstad, Kismet Hall in Vryburg, and Moretele Community Hall in Moretele. All public hearings start at 10.
Have you ever noticed how unique the rugby ball is?
You should check out Head High.
The rise of junior rugby stars Mana and Tai.
Vince is not just their stepfather, he's their coach.
Catch the brothers' dream of the black jersey, Head High, every Sunday at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
#Rugby Drama Galore. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
23 after 6, good morning. In Gaza, it's being reported that both Hamas and Israel want to extend their truce beyond the original 4 days. The truce is a 4-day truce. It started at 7 a.m. on Friday morning. So far, 3 groups of Israeli hostages have been handed over by Hamas and 3 groups of Palestinian prisoners have been released by Israel. It's now reported Hamas is suggesting it's willing to extend the truce by 1 day for every 10 hostages it releases. Naeem Jina is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Naeem, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
I think we had all hoped that when this truce was announced, it might lead to the beginning of a longer peace or at least end this intense conflict we've seen. Is it realistic to hope that this truce could be extended?
At this point, yes, it is realistic. When Hamas had proposed this a few weeks ago, it was just a truce. After this one was tied down and decided on, they said that they hoped that it would be extended to 10 days. The Israelis initially said no, and then Netanyahu came in with the suggestion about the 10 hostages per day. Hamas has now agreed to that, and so it seems likely that that could happen. For how many days, we're not sure. I think that still requires mediation, but it's possible.
I mean, there are a couple of sort of key actors in this. I imagine the US might, maybe, hopefully, be putting pressure on Israel. I mean, are they a key actor here?
They are putting pressure on Israel. The past few weeks have shown that the pressure on Israel is not as effective as one might expect, but they are, and they're saying so publicly, that they're putting pressure on Israel, so that's one issue. But I think that the other issue, and perhaps a bigger issue from the Israeli perspective, is the internal kind of unhappiness with the government, particularly from the, let's say, movement that has developed around the families of those who are being held captive in Gaza. That, in a sense, pushed the government to agree to this first ceasefire starting on Friday, and that will probably be the impetus for the next one as well.
So a lot's going to happen now. Even if there is a truce, and I think everyone hopes that there is, the situation for the Palestinians in Gaza now, so they're living in shelters if they can find them. Many people have been moved from the north to the south. Most of their homes have been demolished. There's nothing to go back to. So, I mean, even if the fighting ends, the story doesn't end here. The reality has been changed in Gaza.
The reality has been changed tremendously. I mean, more than 1 million people have been displaced from the north to the south, within the south, etc. Large-scale destruction in the north. not only residential buildings, but the basic infrastructure for people to live. Everything from hospitals to bakeries have been targeted and destroyed. So it will require a huge kind of reconstruction. But before we even talk about that, we should say that if this truce pause, whatever you want to call it, is extended, at the moment it seems like it will likely be from one day to the next. So it's not. There's no sense yet from either side that they're talking about a long-term ceasefire, which really is what is required to allow the people in Gaza to, sorry for the pun, but pick up the pieces.
So then, is there any possibility of them getting around a table? It wouldn't seem so. I mean, tensions still seem to be so high that the most we can hope for is kind of to catch our breath. I mean, it's a very grim hope.
At the moment, yes. I mean, it seems that from the Palestinian side, they're hoping that each breath that they're allowed to catch would encourage the Israeli side to seek a long-term ceasefire. So I think for now it's kind of from day to day. We'll see by tomorrow what might be agreed, with the Qatari mediation, etc. They might extend it, for example, from 4 days to the 10 days, and then before the end of the 10 days, talk about something more long-term. The one issue here is that the Palestinians have been saying that what they really want is not just, in terms of the long term, not just talks about a ceasefire, but talks about a permanent kind of solution. Israel, of course, is not willing to do that at this stage, but something in between or something that makes a commitment to that in future might be the way to go.
Naeem Jinnah, thank you so much. Senior Researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
So, well, yes, Chiefs beating Morocco Swallows. They'll be very chuffed with that.
Ooh, they're going on. Rise, Cozy Rise. This morning, 1-0 the scoreline. The Soweto Derby took place at Dobsonville Stadium. Let's listen now to Kevin Johnson picking up that second win for Kaizer Chiefs.
I also thought that they stuck to their game plan, Morocco Swallows, and I have to give credit for that, because they tried all. It was only late in the first half, that they tried to change it a little bit and pick up the second ball. But we were aware of that type of movement that they could make, and I thought we had a better first half and probably second half also.
Now, TS Galaxy returned to winning ways. They recorded a 3-0 win over Polokwane City at Mbombela Stadium. Meanwhile, Cape Town City went top of the DStv Premiership standings. They had a 1-0 win over Golden Arrows at Mpumalanga Stadium. And it was the Brazilian Lucas Ribeiro, Namibian Peter Shalulile, and the Uruguayan Gaston Sereno who scored as Mamelodi Sundowns cruised to a 3-0 CAF Champions League win over Nouadhibou of Mauritania. Elsewhere, Aston Villa came from behind at Tottenham to claim a 2-1 win and hand Ange Postecoglou's side their third successive defeat. Here's Postecoglu.
Disappointed, I guess, for the fans and also our players, because I just thought we played outstandingly well today. I thought some of our football was as good as it's been since I got here. Just disappointed that we won't be able to, enjoy the rewards of what I think our efforts deserved.
And finally, golf. South Africa's Dean Burmester carded a blemish-free final round score of 6 under 64 to reach 18 under overall and claim his third DP World Tour title with victory at the Joburg Open. Took place at the Houghton Golf Club. The 34-year-old finished 3 shots clear of nearest challenger and compatriot Darren Fickard. Here's Dean Burmester.
And that was my one goal in these 3 weeks. I hadn't won this year, and I've played some pretty good stuff all throughout my season, and to come here and win a golf tournament in my home country in front of home fans with some of my family here and a lot of my team and friends here is really special. The Sunshine Tour is a super special place, and there are a lot of friends, and it's a great breeding ground for golf. You don't get many golfers out of South Africa that haven't sharpened their teeth out here on the Sunshine Tour.
We'll have more sport on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thank you. Good morning. We'll be talking about crime and the cost of crime. Do you spend more money defending yourself, protecting yourself and your family than you do on maybe educating your children? That's to come. You with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 3 now, stage 4 later at 6:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building Magashule's party, the African Congress of Transformation in Metsimaholo. He says the party is hard at work and will be ready to replace them. Electricity Minister Dr. Hosien Tsoramkgopa has dismissed allegations that Eskom's generation systems are on the verge of a collapse. He was addressing the media in Pretoria on the government's electricity generation plan. And Jordan says it wants a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, not only an extension of the truce. Its foreign minister told the Associated Press that the current war was achieving nothing other than killing people and destroying their livelihoods. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very slow in Pretoria. The rundown to dust for Tunnel Bremer Street, all backed up. It is a load shedding area, but it looks like there may be something around the tunnel. If you're turning off the R80 Mopani Highway onto Bremer, down to the tunnel, just know there's a big backlog of traffic there. It looks like something unfolding on Joburg's N1 North around Gordon Road. If you're arriving up from Soweto, that is slow as you come into the Rudaport area. Misty start to the week between Howick and Durban in parts. There's some very heavy mist, so keep the headlights on, increase those following distances, and watch your speeds, please. Cape Town Marine Drive looking slow coming out of Tableview area. We'll see what happens this morning. That area's been really busy lately. A lot of it has stemmed from the roadworks on Bloberg Road exiting towards Kuberg Road at the refinery. Those roadworks have been lifted, so that should ease that run out, and that may have a general easing effect in the area, but you won't feel like it's easing if you're on that West Coast Road from Sunningdale through to Dolphin Beach. And a stationary My City bus on Cape Town's M2 inbound just around the airport exit. That is pushing traffic back into Khayelitsha with a queue from around Spine Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good morning. How are they?
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, it is markets in Asia Pacific regions that are down across the board. Investors are worried about the consumer inflation rate in Japan increasing to 3% in October. Japan is one of the few countries around the world with a low inflation rate, and investors are worried that if inflation in Japan continues to rise, its central bank will be pushed to increase interest rates. So in Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is down 0.6%. China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.8%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 1%. US markets were mostly up on Friday, and before the US market opens later today, the futures market is also down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.2%, and the dollar to the rand is 18.84.
And manufacturing data for November, that's expected this week.
Yeah, APSA tracks the manufacturing activity through an index called the Purchasing Managers Index, and the index for November will be released on Friday. It will provide a further insight into the health of the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing activity across factories in South Africa has been in decline over the past 5 months because of Eskom blackouts, and manufacturing activity in November is expected to be slightly higher because there were lower stages of Eskom blackouts in the early days of November.
And then vehicle sales for November, those are also coming.
Yeah, also expected this week is those vehicle sales for November, or the data of vehicle sales. Vehicle sales have also been in decline because households and businesses are under immense financial pressures. In September and October, vehicle sales each declined by more than 2%, and a similar decline is expected in November.
Ray Machlaka, thank you very much. Ray, of course, back in an hour's time. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA. Good morning.
Steve Oval, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
What's happened in Sierra Leone? There's a national curfew. People attacked the main barracks.
Stephen, remember that since the re-election of President Julius Maada Bio in June, there's been some uncertainties, there have been some tensions in Sierra Leone. This is one of the countries that have went through civil wars for the past 2 decades. Now, what happened over this weekend and even yesterday for even a curfew regulation to have these leaders being arrested for attacking the military barracks? What comes to mind, Stephen, is that others are saying it was an attempted coup, and we know that the West Africa is not immune from these military coups that we have seen since 2020. Now, yesterday we saw how the government have said that they are able to arrest the current situation, the leaders of this attack, because they are called, I mean, when you go to the media cable, Stephen, they are using the word they're gunmen. But if you go deeper, it might be the issues of military coup plotters in West Africa. But it appears that Julius Maada Bio is under control in terms of managing this attempted military coup.
Sure, very serious. They're in Somalia. Somalia now officially joining the East African Community.
Stephen, interestingly, that you will understand that Somalia has been going through the tough times. If one looks at the population of the Horn of Africa, bringing Somalia, bringing the South Sudan, countries like DRC, Congo, Kenya, Rwanda. Now, Somalia becomes the 8th member state to join the East Africa Community. And for one or two reasons, Stephen, it's all about the issues of economic growth, it's issues of trade, but it's also to deal with the challenges that Somalia has been going through for many years. If one can recall that Somalia was out of this East Africa Community for many years, almost a decade. Now they are back when their president joins the East Africa Community led by the South Sudan in 2023 and 2024.
And then in Madagascar, the president, Andre Rajoelina, he gets re-elected. Obviously, there were those boycotts there.
Stephen, that was confirmed by also the High Constitutional Court of that country on Saturday to confirm the DJ Andre Rajoelina as the president of Madagascar. We still know that the opposition are going to the court, Stephen, contesting this ballot. Looking at the numbers, the turnout was very low, Stephen, compared to the last, and they say he has obtained 58% of the votes of the elections of 16 November of last week that was held in Madagascar. Now, the opposition will be going to the courts to can contest this, but I wonder whether they will have a good case, Stephen, more so they were not part of the elections, as they were urging that people must stay away from these elections in Madagascar and Antananarivo.
And then in the DRC, the Nobel Prize winner, the gynecologist Denis Mukwege, he's launched his electoral campaign.
And he has launched it in the eastern part of the DRC, where it's volatile. That is in the South Kivu, next to Goma. And in Goma, in the North Kivu, we saw that Moses Katumbi was launching his campaign, but Denis was launching it in the south of Kivu, that is in the region of the Bukavu region, Stephen. A very volatile space as well, that this Nobel Peace Prize had to launch it and saying that one thing he will deal with, Stephen, is to tackle corruption once he's elected in office come next month, the 20th of December. We know that there are 24 candidates and the election campaign have started on the 19th of November. So we'll be looking at the DRC Decides 2023.
And then in our archives, this day, 27th of November, 1950, an important birthday.
An important birthday to the great woman of this country, a mother of the soil, a daughter of the soil. This is Mayor Olivier Shisane, Stephen. He was once a former Director General in the Health Department under the first president of the country, Nelson Mandela, in 1994, and also a researcher, an intellectual, a person who has shaped many spaces if you look into the public health system in this country, and a woman who stood his ground, Stephen. He went exiled, by the way, Stephen, at some point when he was not allowed to engage on political activism in his country. But when she came back, she was able to plow her knowledge in this country. Hence, we said, happy birthday to Mayor Dr. Olivia Shisane. Asante Sana SGS was still leading the conversation, SAFM.
Sipho Mantula, thank you so much. Sipho, of course, back with us tomorrow. More news from our continent through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, I don't know if you saw the news over the weekend around Daniel Tiger. And Daniel Tiger is the captain of the under-19 cricket team. He's the head boy at the school that he goes to. And he received the Absa Jewish Achievers Award. And there's been a bit of a sort of ruckus about this because he said the real heroes are sort of young Israeli soldiers and other things like that. And there's been a huge storm around this. And I mean, we've had some people phone in and say he should not be allowed to keep his position if that is his view. And Cricket South Africa saying yesterday that they're going to institute an inquiry. The advocate from Trengrove will look at whether Daniel Tiger violated their codes of conduct. And I was thinking a bit about this. You can go in lots of different directions because are you saying that it was wrong that a person who's going to represent the country in some form as a sports person said X, Y, and Z at an event? Or is it wrong that they believe X, Y, and Z? So are you going to say he should never have said those things? But even if he believes them and didn't say them, that's fine. I mean, wouldn't that get us into quite a strange thing? I mean, if we had to sit every person who represents the country down and ask them questions, I mean, might we be a little surprised about some of the things they believe? On the other hand, you could say that some things you should not say, and therefore he should have kept quiet. And I remember thinking the first time that this sort of that I came across this, I thought, geesh, he's just 19, you know. But I mean, you must also, at what age do you say people must take responsibility for what they say? And 18 must be the limit. So I don't think he can say he can't take responsibility because he's too young. But I mean, what would have happened if he was 17 or something? It's a really interesting story. It's a really interesting issue, I think. And I don't know which way you go on this, on 086 000 2032. I think there are lots of different directions that you could go. And I think that also people are going to have very strong views because we know what's happened in Gaza. And we know what the Israeli Defense Force has done there. We know what Hamas did too to people in Israel. So I think that there are, you know, all sorts of concerns and sort of issues around Daniel Tiger and what he said. Now, I don't know if an inquiry gets us any further. Let's find out. Other people, of course, lots of different views this morning. Errol on the line from Durban. Errol, hi. You want to talk about the festive season?
Yeah, can you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, we can, Errol.
Okay, you know what? We all enjoy the festive season, especially Christmas Day with roast lamb, turkey, whatever, glass of wine. Let's think of those millions of poor people who can't even afford a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
For Christmas. What type of Christmas are these poor guys going to have? You know, my heart always goes out to them.
Yeah. No, Errol, it's an important moment to sort of think about that, I think, as well, and just sort of think about that and one of the realities in our society at the moment. Voice notes coming through this morning on 0614 104 107.
Minus FM listeners. Stephen, that CEO or the executive of one of the banks that says won't settle knows that there's always a comrade in the board who's going to protect them. This is South Africa, Stephen. Z from Bloemfontein.
Well, Z, you say that, but you've got to have evidence before you say that. And as far as I know, no evidence has actually been brought forward about what Standard Bank did. So for Sim Chabalala to say that quite so aggressively, he must really believe it, I would think. Obviously, different views on the Rand manipulation issue. 16 minutes to 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
As you know, and as I'm sure you've felt in the last few years, such a big jump in the amount of crime. Last week, the World Bank confirming crime is costing South Africa around 10% of our gross domestic product every year. That means you may well be spending more on security to protect your family than you are educating your children, or even more than you're spending on healthcare, for example. It also means the cost of crime is around 700 billion Rand. Dr. Dion George is the DA Shadow Minister of Finance. Dr. George, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners.
We've seen the huge cost of crime. That's in financial terms. What impact do you believe it's actually having on our society?
Well, I think what it's doing is devastating things to our economy because and our society. If we start at society, I mean, what does it mean to everybody in the street? When, for example, their homes are broken into, they cannot walk into the street safely because they fear for what will happen. That's not how a normal society is supposed to operate. Now, obviously, there is crime throughout the entire world, but what functional governments do is that they actually make sure that they put enough money on policing and that they have enough resources on the ground and that they rise to the occasion. Now, unfortunately, our government isn't able to do that because it's basically running out of money and it's cutting back in areas that it shouldn't do. So we don't have enough police. We don't have enough police stations. We don't have a criminal justice system that's working efficiently because government isn't putting enough money on it. So through the action of government, it's basically indicating that it doesn't care about fighting crime because it's taken the money and put it in other places. And that brings us to the economy. What it's doing to the economy, there's an estimate that what it's done to the economy, it's deprived revenue of about 175 billion rand. Now that's a very, very significant amount of money. So if crime was lower, our economy would grow better. We would have more revenue into the national revenue pot, which means there'd be more money available to provide the service. So the system starts to break down, and that's the fundamental problem. And that's what the Financial Action Task Force identified when they grey listed South Africa. It's not in the financial regulations that's the issue. It's the justice system. It isn't working, and that is the problem. At the same time, you've got enormous amount of socio-economic problems, which also drives crime. So you've got an unvirtuous cycle unfolding here, and it's very detrimental to our economy and to the population. Obviously, it's very stressful living under these conditions, especially when the cost of living is driving up relentlessly. So we're not in a good space, but I think what is possible, it can be turned around if government makes the right choices.
Is part of it the sort of spending allocations that we make, what we spend on the VIP protection unit, for example? I mean, Shamila Batohi, I think, used the word revolting in an interview in the Sunday Times when she was asked about the VIP protection unit being 74% of the NPA's budget. I mean, would you agree with her?
Absolutely. The problem we've got here is that we've got a government that's out of touch. So, for example, if you looked at what President Ramaphosa apparently spent when they flew over to London, it was 24,000 rand per head on catering when nearly 5 million children in South Africa are starving. Same with the VIP protection units. They often behave like thugs, rushing through the traffic, knocking people out of the way. For what purpose? It's just vanity, unfortunately. And that's what happens when you have a government that's out of touch. So it doesn't care that the average citizen is battling. Also, as we've seen several instances where VIP so-called protectors have treated the innocent public extremely badly. So it merely just is a reflection. So it's not only how you allocate your money that demonstrates where your priorities lie and what you actually think, but it's the behavior. And that's the big problem. Because South Africa actually is a rich country. We have enormous potential. We've got massive minerals. We've got so much potential. We've got a young population. But that's all getting wasted because that's the opportunity cost of this basically broken government. So when you look at what allocation is done to, for example, the criminal justice system, to the police, etc., it's hopelessly inadequate. And there is a view that it's done deliberately because if you make a country slightly ungovernable, it's very difficult for the people to actually exercise their political rights more effectively and then change the government that starts to oppress them. So we do have a very significant problem here, but it all starts really with making sure that there's enough pressure so that government can put money in the right place. It doesn't do that. Why? It's because it's too strong. And what needs to happen is that the people need to change that. That's the crux of the issue here.
Dr. Deon George, thank you. The DA Shadow Minister of Finance, obviously political comments coming through there, as you would expect, and as is right. 11 minutes now to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Very heavy at the Dustwood Tunnel in Pretoria. There's a big queue going south on the volume side, but there's also backlog running north as well. There is some load shedding in that area, but there looks like it may well be something else. That section of Bremer Street just very heavily backed up, particularly coming off the busy Mopani Highway. Big queues on Pretoria's N4. This is the Emelathleni Highway moving through Watermeyer Street, all jammed up through towards the N1. That's early. That's a little bit unusual. And we've got a crash through Midrand, exactly the wrong place to have a collision. N1 south at Samrand, and that's pushing traffic back towards Brockfontein interchange. Load shedding plus a load of traffic light faults in four ways. Load shedding at Park Ridge, Easterhout already queuing down towards Randburg, Bayers Nordia and Jim Fouchier all backed up as well. And big queues out of Soweto this morning. The N1 North coming up towards Gordon Road. Looks like there's been a crash there around that Gordon Road exit at Ridderpoort, pushing traffic back through towards the N17, the stadium exit. Durban this morning, N2 North, that's already queuing up from the M7 into the roadworks at Spaghetti Junction. Cape Town, some good news from the Tableview. They're heavily fairly congested Tableview region. The roadworks on Bloberg Road at Coburg Road, which have been causing delays over the last few weeks, have been lifted. And you can see straight away that traffic flow on Bloberg Road has eased up. Once news of that sort of lifting of the roadworks gets around, it should start to alleviate the problems on Marine Drive and Otto du Plessis out towards the Dolphin Beach. That's very heavy. And Malabongwe Drive staying heavy coming off Sandown Road at Rivergate down towards the N7. Those two routes have been noticeably busier through the duration of the roadworks. And Cape Town staying in the area. The N2 inbound's heavy this morning, queuing traffic from the airport right through to a crash at Jan Smuts Drive. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
Life is full of challenges, and when they come your way, learn to whack your way through it.
Yeah.
My father and my mother were highly disciplined people. I remember him saying, I have decided to deny myself whatever others are enjoying, to accumulate enough money so that any of my children who wants to study would have the resources available to study so that they don't have to suffer the way I have had to suffer.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation. At SAFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
8 minutes to 7. Well, the heat wave over the centre of the country just refusing to budge. Very hot in most of Gauteng, surrounding provinces for about a week now. One or two small patches of rain or so, I'm told. Generally seen temperatures of well over 30 degrees. Lows of, over 20. And that tells you how warm it is. You wake up in the middle of the night still quite hot. No rain forecast, from what I can see, for another week or so. And please, just a reminder, be careful outside. Make sure children have plenty of water. Make sure they're protected from the sun. Don't go out into the sun too much yourself. Don't work in the sun too much yourself. You know how dangerous heat like this can be. Professor Guy Midgley is the Director of Climate Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Midgley, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
We've had heat waves like this in Gauteng before, though I can't remember one being as long as this. Do we know why a heat wave can take so long to dissipate? And I'm sure there'll be historical examples of intense long heat waves. But do we know at this stage if global warming is a factor?
Well, there's no aspect of the weather that is not affected by global warming anymore. So that question has become moot. I mean, every aspect of our weather has been affected by global warming now. There's so much more additional energy in the oceans and in the atmosphere. So one of the things that we're experiencing at the moment is well above average sea surface temperatures in the Indian and Southern Atlantic Oceans. And that will also be playing a role in exacerbating, making worse the heat wave conditions.
So that means, I would have thought that with a lot more energy, we might get more regular thunderstorms. That doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, well, that's because of the enhanced high pressure system, which tends to work against thunderstorms, because you have descending air that is causing a higher pressure, which also raises the temperature. It also tends to suppress thunderstorm activity. So you don't have that relief either.
Okay. When thunderstorms come, if it's a lot hotter, as you say, and I accept that it is, would they then be could they be more intense? Now, always the sort of poster child for this, obviously, the prime example we think of is the cut-off low that caused the intense flooding in KwaZulu-Natal last year over the Easter period, just before Easter. Could we actually have more intense sort of thunderstorms in the Gauteng area than we've seen in the past, already some of the strongest in the world?
Well, in general, rainfall events do become more intense because the humidity in the atmosphere on average is going up. And that leads, if the humidity goes up, it's got to come down at some point. So that means more extreme rainfall events. But a lot of the risk relates to lightning and grass fires because we've come out of a very wet period. And there's a lot of grass biomass sitting on the land surface in southern Africa, which is ready to burn. So that's another huge risk that we have now. Heat wave conditions combined with veld fires, that is something very serious that we've got to watch out for.
Is this the kind of weather Gauteng needs to prepare for? This is how it's going to be. This heat wave is going to be the sort of reality of our near-term future.
Yes, that's almost certainly the case. And it's a little bit like throwing a dice. If you say that a heat wave condition is a 6, and you throw the dice, then you'd expect about 15% of the time to have a heat wave condition. But what climate change is doing is it's changed the number 1 on the dice to a 7. So now, the chances of heat wave conditions go up very, very sensitively as the average goes up. That's the problem with these extreme events. They're very sensitive to a rise in the average temperature, and this is what messes around the insurance industry and farmers who need certain weather conditions to produce or to avoid certain weather conditions to have crop failures, etc. This is the sensitive margin of global warming.
When it's hot like this, some people will use air conditioners. They'll go and buy some gadget to try and cool themselves down. Do air conditioners make it worse? Do they have an impact on the atmosphere? And obviously, some places, Saudi Arabia, lots of the Middle East, Qatar, places like that, people literally live 24/7 in air conditioning. In the United States, certain seasons of the year, people also just live in air conditioning 24/7. Does that have an impact? Are air conditioners bad?
Well, if you run them off fossil fuels, yes. But if you're running air conditioners off solar power, not really. So you're just reorganizing the energy distribution between inside and outside. So it depends on what kind of energy you're running your solar power, your air conditioning off. If it's off solar, you're fine.
Okay. I don't know. There's COP coming up and people have been talking a lot about what will change and what won't. It seems to me that there are moments where I think, okay, the world's properly understood this now and there's going to be concerted effort. And then there are moments where I think, actually, we haven't understood anything and we're about to get punished for that. How do you see it? Do you get any sense that the sort of public opinion, the political pressure on people to change is getting through?
I think people are beginning to understand it, and heat waves like this help us to understand why there's so much sensitivity on the margin. There's a huge benefit for Africa if we can limit global warming to 1.5 versus 2 degrees, particularly with heat waves. It radically reduces the risks of heat wave, 1.5 versus 2 degrees. It's about a 40% difference. So it's hugely in Africa's interest to mitigate as fast as possible and avoid these sorts of events.
Perhaps the biggest factor, strangely, we're seeing two things happen at the same time. The one is that in China, it seems that's a society hugely responsible for a big proportion of sort of industrial output. That seems to really be changing quite quickly. And then the other, which I think takes a lot of people by surprise, is the United States, which has huge political arguments about global warming, and yet places like Texas has sort of moved over to renewable power very quickly. Those global shifts, are they going to have a big impact that the economics of climate change is now beginning to work?
Yes, the economics of renewables is impossible to ignore and will accelerate. The challenge is what happens between now and then, and things like wars and disruptions in gas energy supply, for example, to Germany, have caused regression on some of the climate targets. So we really do need a peaceful planet to be able to work together, because this is a team game. All countries have to cooperate to save ourselves. But at the moment, we're really struggling on that front due to some really paltry, pathetic global leadership.
Professor Guy Midgley, thank you. Director of Climate Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. Well, unfortunately, I'm afraid, as he says, that this is what Gauteng is going to have to get used to. I'm afraid, Cape Town, it's going to be your turn at some point, probably later in the summer. And, of course, Uppington today, their temperature well in the 40s once again. Lots to come over the next little while. We'll talk about Stage 6 load shedding. What on earth went wrong this time? And we'll talk also about some of the problems that local councils have in implementing all of that, and more on crime to come as well. You with SAFM leading the conversation. It's 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, EFF leader speaks of members assisting Magashule's new party, and electricity minister denies imminent collapse of generation systems. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building his party, the African Congress for Transformation in Metsimaholo. Malema was addressing party members in Bloemfontein. He says the party is hard at work and will be ready to replace them. He says they are not dismayed by the behavior of members whom he called opportunists as they are on their way out. Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosian Tsholamogopa has dismissed allegations that Eskom's generation systems are on the verge of collapse. He was addressing the media in Pretoria on the government's electricity generation plan. The briefing also comes as Eskom downgrades rolling blackouts from stage 6 to 4 due to an improvement in emergency reserves and a return of generation units to service. Ramogopa says getting the country back to providing sustainable electricity supply is the government's priority.
We have seen a significant improvement from the Friday when we implemented stage 6 load shedding. And then also in relation to our pump storage now, we have for Drakensberg, we have additional generating hours now. It's about 90 hours in Gula. We'll have 58 hours of generation hours, and then at Palmit, 33 hours of generation. So essentially we have made progress.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has called on the police and traffic officers to work together to do away with lawlessness and hijackings in the province. He was speaking at the launch of the festive season road safety campaign in Tsakane on the Gauteng's East Rand. The campaign was launched by Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga alongside Gauteng Transport MEC Kidiboni Diale Tlhabela. Lesufi says if law enforcement officers work together, they will prevent a number of crimes.
We have to put all our resources together. We don't have to compete, we have to complement each other. We don't have to appreciate each other, but we must work together to ensure that we fight crime in our province. If we are serious about fighting crime in our province and in our country, we have to revisit the registration regime of vehicles.
A woman has been bludgeoned to death at Minga village, RDP section outside Malamulele in Limpopo on a gender-related violence. The perpetrator later hung himself on a tree near the Levubu River. Police spokesperson Hlulane Mashaba says the victim was apparently assaulted by a pig handle which has been found with blood stains. The body of the woman was found with both hands tied with a rope. Police suspect gender and domestic-related dispute as a possible cause of the incident. Mashaba says the perpetrator is a Mozambican national.
The police received a complaint about the incident and rushed to the scene and found the body of a woman with an open wound on the face laying inside the room in a pool of blood with her hands tied with a rope. The police also discovered a pig with blood stains behind the door believed to have been utilized during the commission of the barbaric incident. The deceased was identified by the next of kin as Rolentia Chauke.
Jordan says it wants a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, not only an extension of the truce. Its foreign minister told the Associated Press that the current war was achieving nothing other than killing people, destroying their livelihoods, and creating what he called an environment of hate and dehumanization that would define generations. Yesterday saw the release by Hamas of the third batch of hostages, which included 14 Israeli and 3 Thai nationals. Israel freed 39 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports.
This agreement has wobbled but not collapsed. Another group of Israeli hostages are out of Gaza, including an 84-year-old woman now in hospital and a 4-year-old American-Israeli girl whose parents were both killed in the Hamas attack. 39 Palestinian teenagers held in Israeli jails have also been released. The families of some, including all those returning to East Jerusalem, have been banned from public celebrations or giving media interviews.
Recapping your top story, EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with the former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building his party, the African Congress for Transformation in Metsimaholo. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 7:30.
Luyanda, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Is your cash flow tighter than bumper-to-bumper traffic on the N1? Navigate the financial gridlock by asking Outsurance to save you money on your car insurance premium. If they can't, ask them to pay you 500 Rand cash. That's monthly savings, or 500 Rand cash. If they can't, beat your premium. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, it's rugby. The Springbok skipper Siya Kolisi delivering the goods for Racing 92 on debut. And in boxing, it's South Africa's Kevin Lerena who wins the WBC interim bridgerweight title. Let's find out more just before 7:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
And in the traffic, it stays heavy coming out of Soweto. Route 1, the N1, heavily queued up to an obstruction around the Gordon Road exit this morning. Also a breakdown on the N3 North at Giluli. So you've got the delays around the roadworks at Van Buren. And then that breakdown blocking a lane as you come up to Giluli. So very heavy pressure from Elan's interchange. N12 leaving Benoni quite slow through to Rondebolt Road this morning. And the N4 into Pretoria, the Emelafleni Highway, still queued up through Watermeyer Street down towards the N1. Durban, a lot of pressure into Spaghetti Junction. You've got roadworks on the N2 both ways, and complicating matters, you've got a crash on the N3 going inbound at Sherwood. So the N3 from Pavilion moving through Spaghetti Junction's heavy, and all that traffic on the N2 that backs into the roadworks at Spaghetti Junction, then queues as you come out of the interchange and into that N3. Traffic's all very heavy. The M7 into Pinetown worth a mention as well. Heavy backlogs moving up towards St John's Avenue Bridge. In Cape Town, big traffic on the N2 at this hour coming from the airport through to town. It's a crash right in the middle of the N2 at Jan Smuts Drive, and that has pushed the traffic back to the airport exit. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7:07, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Lots going on as always this Monday morning. Sort of looking at the stage 6 load shedding we had over the weekend and just how bad it's been. And unfortunately, some indications that actually it could still be with us for a very long time through the festive season. Try and find out sort of a bit more about why that is and what the problems are. And then also, what's changing and what isn't. I think that's important to look at as well. I've seen in Joburg, for example, there are all sorts of issues around city power and making it work. That seems to be a problem. They took over the load shedding there from Eskom. I'm not entirely sure why, in a way. I sort of get what they were trying to do, I think, which is to reduce the sort of number of times you were in load shedding for 4 hours at the high levels of load shedding. But some people very much complaining about that. We'll talk a bit more about organised crime later. We've spoken so much about organised crime recently. And then I must just tell you, after 8:30, we thought actually very important to talk a little bit about Sudan, because we've been focusing on the Middle East so much. So we'll talk about Sudan and just sort of get an update on that. I mean, that situation really is going to have such a big impact on our entire continent. But so many people affected by that we thought we should really have a look at that. And also, of course, calls this morning and conversations around the manipulation of the rand and what happened there. The banks sort of beginning to hit back, the National Treasury sort of hitting back and just, I think, trying to explain things a little better. And then Daniel Tiger, the captain of the under-19 cricket team, and the comments he made about Israel. We'll look at that as well as we go through the morning. Good to hear from you as always on 086 000 2032. Good morning, Monday morning, 9 minutes after 7.
SFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
I reflected on the lives of these men and said, Steve Biko could have been a medical doctor. Aubrey Mokwape, they could have been medical doctors, but for the sake of me and many others, they chose a path of justice. What challenges me all the time is there are multitudes out there who are unemployed, who are uneducated, people who from time to time go to bed without food. this is an opportunity to use this privilege, to use this position for the advancement of the cause of justice, because there is so much more that still needs to be done out there.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
Buying a new TV? You'll need a paid-up TV license. Need to check your balance? No sweat at all. You just SMS your ID or TV license account number to 44210 for fast, effective balance inquiries. Secure your legal viewing fast and simple. Standard SMS rates will be charged. Terms and conditions apply. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
November. It even starts with the word no. No reasonably priced holidays, no tickets to that thing your kids want to go to, nowhere without queues, and no flights anywhere worth going to. It's November. So, we are charging no fees for 6 months when you sign up for a 10x retirement product in November. No fees, no drama, just results. Speak to a retirement expert today. 10x your future. 10x is a licensed FSP. T's and C's apply.
Dove is not just gentle and moisturizing.
It took great care of the nation
During the Rugby World Cup France 2023. Dove rocks, just like the box.
Danko Unilever for your remarkable contribution to the momentous journey of global heroes.
Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
12 after 7, good morning. Well, as you had to survive stage 6 load shedding for almost all of the weekend, the Minister for Electricity in the Presidency, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, denying yesterday that in fact stage 8 load shedding had been implemented. He said it was only stage 6. Some warnings this morning: we may have load shedding all the way really into the festive season. As you know, most of the coal fleet is old. The new power stations, Medupi and Kusile, have huge design flaws, which means they're not running properly. Mohammed Mahdi is the CEO of Sinan Energy and an energy expert. Mohammed, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
So we had stage 6 load shedding during a weekend. I mean, you'd expect demand to be quite low then. What does this tell us about how vulnerable our power system is?
Look, unfortunately, and we have said this before, even on this platform, that given the weather and given the implications of the high temperatures, it does lead to a very unfavorable scenario for the grid as well as for the generating fleet. And that came to, that was very clearly obvious over the weekend. What this means going forward in, the hotter parts of summer is that we are going to have a grid that will be even more crippled than it currently is. So the outlook, unfortunately, is not very good.
When you talk about summer, is it because there's more demand, people are using air conditioners and things like that, or fans? Is it also because the effectiveness of generating electricity through coal, through the cooling towers, it doesn't work quite as well? If it's very hot, is it harder to sort of make the system work?
That's exactly right. So on the demand side, there's clearly a higher demand. Just to remind everyone that we had the first major bout of load shedding in January 2008 during a fairly hot January. We are now expecting one of the hottest summers in many years. So on the demand side, that's clearly a problem. And again, on the supply side, the generation units, exactly as you pointed out, the cooling cycle, as we call it, has to work harder. So the units generally are a little bit less efficient and, put a lot more under pressure than they otherwise would have been in cooler weather. So those two factors, but primarily the demand, the cooling cycle is sort of fairly well managed. It's just, it does mean that more is taken out of the power station. But the demand is what causes this, together with the fact that we have an aging fleet. On average, our power stations are over 32 years old. On average, of course, there are exceptions. The new power stations, as you've pointed out, are not designed well, not performing according to what we expected them to perform. So with an aging fleet that is under a lot of pressure and high temperatures, of course, you're going to have more unplanned breakdowns, unplanned outages, those sort of things.
We had thought things were getting better. Things were making, progress. I mean, there was a warning from Eskom we might have stage 8 over the winter, and we didn't. Were we just too optimistic? Were we just not realistic? Or did we sort of get lulled into a false sense of security and actually this is our real reality?
I think, look, to be fair, most analysts and most experts who have, a reasonable knowledge of the generation fleet did predict that the situation will get worse as we got into summer. I've said repeatedly that August and September, even October, are not good months to be making predictions about what's going to happen in summer, specifically not September and October. Those are fairly easy months in terms of demand and the supply side. So this is entirely predictable, what could happen. And what is even more worrying is that, we are going to have a very, very hot summer. So hopefully, by the time we get to winter, we've got a little bit more alleviation of the problem. But the outlook right now, unfortunately, doesn't look very good.
From what I can see, we've been using quite a lot of diesel for the open cycle gas turbines, and that's normally a bad sign, isn't it? I mean, it means we don't have enough power and they're very expensive.
Correct. I mean, just to give you an idea, the cost of diesel power typically, so let's take in a commercial or industrial setting, the cost of diesel power is around about R8.50 per kilowatt hour. Assume that Eskom gets diesel at a much more favorable price. Even then, your cost per kilowatt hour is over R7. And then they've got very large, generators, diesel generators. So the efficiency is a little bit more. So their cost per kilowatt hour is between R6 and R7. That compared to a typical cost of under R2 in terms of, flat generation cost from Eskom. In fact, closer to around R1.28. So that gives you some idea of just how much more diesel power is compared to the typical coal-fired generation that we get, or nuclear power for that matter.
There was a huge boom in solar power. We saw many people investing in that, companies investing in that as well. I think 85 billion rand was spent in something like 15 months. Is that having a huge impact still? It would be a lot worse without that?
It is. It's undoubtedly having a huge impact, and it is. So there's a good side and a bad side to it. The good side is that the consumers, the off-takers, are seeing the benefit of it. The bad side, if you want to call it that, is that Eskom's revenue base is shrinking, and their debt is not shrinking proportionately. In fact, it's growing. So the impact on Eskom is very severe. But what has really made a difference in the last 15 to 20 months is the uptake of battery energy storage solutions. And this has allowed for more stable supply to off-takers. This has allowed them to be able to provide or have power during peak times, especially businesses, and also during load shedding times. So when you put in a battery energy storage solution, for example, it's a lot cheaper than running a diesel generator. And this has made a phenomenal impact throughout industry. And we're seeing the uptake of battery solutions, growing beyond expectations right now.
Mohammed Mahdi, thank you, CEO of Sinan Energy and an expert on energy, as you can hear. 18 minutes after 7, you were there, SAFM. Meanwhile, in Joburg City, Power is now running load shedding there, having taken over the implementation of load shedding from Eskom in areas where City Power is responsible for the distribution of power. But residents say they're still having issues with the schedule. It isn't always working, or City Power isn't sticking to their schedule, depending on where you live. Certainly where I live, I must tell you, I've had that problem as well. And from what I can tell, so have many other people. Isaac Mangena is the spokesperson for City Power. He joins us now. Isaac, good morning to you, and thank you for your time. Are you able to stick to the schedules that you've published for load shedding?
Good morning, Steve, and good morning to the listeners. The answer is yes. We are able to stick to the load shedding. It's a regulated process, and there's no way that we won't be able to stick to the load shedding. The problem comes when, obviously, during load shedding or when we restore power, maybe you find that there are post-loading outages caused by different reasons. It could be the theft of the cable, the equipment that failed, and so forth. But in terms of sticking to what is on paper, what we have communicated, we do definitely stick to that.
So any areas that aren't being load shed according to the timetable, that's an isolated problem. It's not a big problem across the city.
No, we have not received such complaints about areas that are supposed to be load shed or they haven't been load shed. The only issue is when we move to the new schedule, where you find that people are still looking at their suburbs or blocks. People are still looking at their suburbs or blocks from the old schedule, and we did appeal to them that they need to basically go to City Power website and try and get the schedules, the updated schedule, because maybe their suburbs would have moved. So that is the issue that we basically saw. But also when we did the demarcation of the blocks, you find that there were some of the suburbs that were fed previous. So in those instances, we find that, for example, Hurlingham, well, basically part of it will be in maybe Block 4, another part will be in Block 12. And this is because when there was a fault or a problem with the network there, to keep the lights on, we basically fed them from the port, the other block. And as such, you find that when we do that, that is when some of the customers were thrown off. But there is no universal problem around load shedding and the problems. But also, you find that some of the people also look at the schedule from the private app. And some of those private apps, we find that they did not update in time when we basically moved or migrated to this new process. And as such, you find that they're still looking at the different load shedding schedule to the one that we have on the website.
Okay. This new system, does it mean, so what you wanted to do was avoid the sort of 4-hour load shedding blocks during intense load shedding. Doesn't it mean you have to switch the power off and on more often? And isn't that a problem for your system?
So basically, the idea behind taking over was not only the fact that we wanted to do away with the 4 hours, but there are many other benefits that most people did not actually pick, or maybe they were not brought forth, except the fact that we're doing the 2 hour. Most of those were the fact that we are now able. Most of the industries in the city of Johannesburg and the businesses are able to run even during load shedding without any hindrance. So we've saved jobs. We've also ensured that those businesses, because they had already started writing letters threatening to leave the city of Johannesburg, they remain in the city of Johannesburg. In that instance, it means that jobs and even production, economic activity continues during load shedding. But also the essential services. The hospitals, that there was a request from the national government that we need to basically exclude them from load shedding. In that system where we were load shed by Eskom, we're not able to do that. There were problems with water supply because of load shedding. Most people were complaining here on your show, Stephen, complaining about water supply from Mogale City, West Rand, and so forth. It was because of the pump station, rainwater pump station in Robertville in that area was load shed by Eskom. It's basically our substation, but it was load shed by Eskom. Since we took over on the 6th of November, those complaints are no longer there because that pump station is excluded completely from load shedding. And that's like the people in Mogale City, in West Rand, and parts of Greater Port are no longer having those kind of issues. Yes, the 2 hours is also an add-on in terms of the load shedding. But you remember that this is where we were about 3 years ago. It's not the first time we're doing this 2 hour load shedding. We did it 3 years ago, and when Eskom forced us to move to align with their block, the residents were complaining about that, and those complaints were sustained. And as such, it was easy for us to basically say, let's move back there so that we are able to, at least in the lower stages of load shedding, we're able to stick to the 2 hours. And we have been doing that. And in the lower stages of load shedding, most people have got more lives than in the past, Stephen.
Okay. And Isaac, this may be a strange question, but we know that people steal your equipment during load shedding, so they steal your cables during load shedding. When you switch it on after a shorter period of load shedding, is it sort of harder? Does this system maybe reduce the amount of theft? I mean, is it possible to know?
Yeah, so with the new system that we're pushing, this new process, we're seeing a little bit of decrease in terms of the theft of equipment. This is because criminals have got little time to basically execute their plans. In the past 4 hours, they've got time to basically dig, cut the cables, and basically move without being detected. So currently with this new system, we're able, in the 2 hours, they're actually being able to be deterred. Because of the short space of time. But the equipment itself, remember, it was never even built to basically withstand load shedding. When the network was designed many years ago, 100 years ago, it was not designed to basically be able to withstand load shedding. And we're still having those problems. And that's why some people may actually still find themselves load shed long, maybe not being able to be restored on time because of maybe an equipment failed, maybe the link substation blew up or cable got stolen and so forth. So the fact that we took the 2 hours, this does not mean the problems of load shedding are gone. They're still there. So people will still continue to experience some of those outages, but we are doing our best to ensure that we have teams that respond adequately and immediately when we've got those problems.
Isaac Mangena, thank you. Spokesperson for City Power in Joburg, 25 minutes after 7.
SFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
When something is in the heart, you really don't need to be checking as if it was something that was designed to facilitate your appointment. One of the things that I promised the nation was to make sure that transformation happens, with a view to ensuring that work is somewhat evenly distributed among whites, black people, and both black and white women. That is the one responsibility among many that I have pursued with everything within my heart.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
You see, change happens and it improves our lives. Change is good. It opens doors to new horizons and leads to a more informed tomorrow. Being in the know is no longer for the selected few. Information is for all of us to enjoy, whenever, wherever. Sunday World, putting the latest stories, sports results, exclusive video content, and celebrity news at your fingertips. To stay informed, download the Sunday World app today. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Sunday is just the start.
Dressing up is a winning mentality.
If you look good, you do good.
You feel good too.
Big ups to Polo South Africa
for making the SABC Sport team look good during the Rugby World Cup France 2023. Class and style on another level.
Rolez-vous.
Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Is your cash flow tighter than bumper-to-bumper traffic on the N1? Navigate the financial gridlock by asking Outsurance to save you money on your car insurance premium. If they can't, ask them to pay you 500 Rand cash. That's monthly savings or 500 Rand cash if they can't beat your premium. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Siya Kolisi wins again.
And yes, the two-time Rugby World Cup winning captain tasted victory on his Racing 92 debut as they beat La Rochelle 32-10 in Paris to take over the number one spot in the French top 14 table. On to soccer action, RS Berkane beating debutant Sekhukhune United 2-0 in their CAF Confed Cup group stage encounter. And the Egyptian side, Modern Future, they narrowly edged SuperSport United by a 1-0 in their home opening CAF Confed Cup group match. In the meantime, Mamelodi Sundowns cruised to a 3-0 CAF Champions League win over Nouadhibou of Mauritania, while Manchester United moved up to 6th in the Premier League table with a 3-0 win over Everton at Goodison Park. And cricket action, the opener Yashapsi Jaiswal and Ishan Kishan led India and their batting charge to a 44-run win over Australia in the second 2020 international. The hosts kept Australia down to 191 for 9, extending their lead to 2-0 in the 5-match series. Motorsport, the world champion Max Verstappen capped his historically dominant 2023 Formula One campaign, claiming victory at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix to take sole ownership of third on the sport's all-time list of race winners. Charles Leclerc took second for Ferrari, Mercedes' George Russell took third. Verstappen's teammate Sergio Perez finished second, but was demoted to fourth by a 5-second penalty for causing a late race collision with Lando Norris, who came fifth ahead of McLaren's teammate Oscar Piastri. Here's Max Verstappen.
An incredible season. It was a bit emotional on the end lap. You know, it was the last time I was sitting in the car, which has, of course, given me a lot. So, yeah, I'm, of course, very proud to win also here the last race. But, yeah, I have to say a big thank you to everyone at Red Bull. It's just been an incredible year. It will be hard to do something similar again, but we definitely enjoyed this year.
And finally, boxing, South Africa's heavyweight Kevin Lerena, took the German-based Albanian Senad Gashti by unanimous 12-round decision, winning at Empress Palace in Gauteng. Here's what Lerena had to say.
Heavyweight division is a tough division. There's a lot of big names and strong big guys. But you know what? You know, if you don't challenge yourself or test yourself, then you're never going to get better in life or improve or evolve. So for me, it's been a big step up going up to heavyweight. But we came off a knockout victory in March, and then we went the distance with Marius Vach on the 17th of September, and we won by unanimous decision. So our campaign in heavyweight is going good, and obviously the last 8 years has been good for me, as I am on a winning roll for the past 8 years.
More sport on Sunrise. Headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. We'll be talking about how you pay for trips and minibus taxis, ways around using cash. That's coming up next. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 3 now, Stage 4 later, 7:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building his party, the African Congress for Transformation in Metsimaholo. He was addressing party members in Bloemfontein. Kimberley's Sol Plaatje municipality is still battling to fully restore water supply around the city. The municipality, which is plagued by constant water cuts, embarked on an unplanned shutdown on Wednesday morning last week, leaving many residents stranded and frustrated. And the governor of the U.S. state of Vermont, Phil Scott, says the shooting of 3 students of Palestinian descent should not incite more hate or divisiveness. Police say the 3 men, all aged 20, were visiting the city of Burlington for the Thanksgiving holidays, and they are not critically injured. I'll have details on this and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Stays heavy on Pretoria's N4. This is the run-in towards Hatfield, if you like, on the Emilafeni Highway. Very busy earlier this morning, and now a crash in that queue at Vartameyer Street. So extra pressure coming through from Rousseau. Bottom of the N1 in Midrand. There's a collision on the M1 South, linked to the N1 South. So you come from Allendale, get through Buccleuch, all jammed up as you turn down towards the Fourways area. Crashing at Killarney, Mike 1 North around 11th Avenue. That's a big queue from Boysons up over the double-decker, or under the double-decker, and up through Parktown and on your way towards Killarney. Very heavy queues there. Durban, a lot of pressure around Spaghetti Junction. Roadworks plus a crash on the N3 inbound at Sherwood. Now, the N3 coming inbound queues all the way back to Paradise Valley. So if you're exiting Pinetown, that's a big heavy queue to work through. And it's just keeping the extra pressure on the N2 as you queue to Spaghetti Junction through all the roadworks. And then you sit on those ramps off the N2, basically onto the N3, driving into that crash and into that traffic. M7 into Pinetown stays heavy. Hunt-Stedman Highway all the way through to St John's Avenue Bridge territory. And Cape Town, well, good and bad news coming out of Tableview. The good news, the roadworks at Bloberg Road and Coburg Road have been lifted. Bad news, it's been replaced by a crash this morning in front of the refinery on Coburg Road at Plattercliff Road. So it's all very heavy going that way. Collision, N1 inbound at Plattercliff, delays from Brackenfell, and a crash on the N2 into Cape Town at Jan Smuts Drive, and that's why he's sitting in traffic back towards the airport. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, it is markets in the Asia-Pacific region that are mostly down. The investor focus this week will be on China's economy and its health. Data on China's manufacturing activity for November will be released later in the week, and most economists do not expect a recovery in China's manufacturing sector and economy. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.5%, Japan's Nikkei is down 0.4%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.6%. US markets were mostly up on Friday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.3%, and the dollar to the rand is 18.81.
And Treasury and the banks have been talking about the alleged currency manipulation. Standard Bank saying we will not settle. They say the claims have not hurt the currency.
Yeah, the National Treasury says that the alleged manipulation of the currency by 28 local and international banks did not influence the rand exchange rate. The Treasury says there is no evidence that the behavior of banks from 2007 to 2013 strengthened or weakened the rand. Rather, what has influenced the weakness in the rand are significant constraints in the economy, such as Eskom blackouts and the logistics crisis in the hands of Transnet. Minister in the presidency, Kumbudzo Nchaveni, claimed that the banks conspired to collapse the economy. However, banks including Standard Bank and Nedbank have hit back at Nchaveni's comments, saying they are false and inaccurate.
And then, Shane, the Chinese shopping group, they've got 250,000 shoppers in South Africa. That's huge.
Yeah, Chinese online retailer Shein is growing in South Africa, according to a survey by the Marketing Research Foundation. Shein sells to 247,000 shoppers in South Africa. The survey asked thousands of consumers where they bought clothing between June 2022 and July 2023, and Shein is selling to more shoppers in South Africa than H&M and local retailer Legit.
Ray Maklaka, thank you very much indeed. Ray, of course, back tomorrow. More news, business news through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, that's the number. Paul Mashatile, the Deputy President, he was speaking about gender-based violence over the weekend. Alan Busak, the Reverend Alan Busak, saying we should do away with racial classification. I was a little surprised, not entirely surprised to sort of see that. The Daniel Tiga story as well, the situation in the Middle East. David on the line from Gqeberha. Hi, good morning. You want to talk about Eskom?
Morning, David. Yes, it's a simple question. Morning, Stephen. It's a simple question. The supply of diesel is through a tender process. Can we ask Treasury why they can't take over the supply of diesel, thereby removing the tenders? Because we know there is this link between the sabotage at the power stations and the consumption of diesel. It's in the tenders supply. It's in their interest to have the coal-fired power stations not performing so they can supply more diesel. It's a simple question back to Treasury. Why have you not taken it over?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how it works. I know there are plenty of sort of middle people or middlemen involved there, and I would like to think you could remove some of them because it seems... I mean, and the other thing that hasn't happened is that we find that, for example, Eskom still has to pay, the people are still having to pay road accident fund levies on diesel, which to me doesn't make sense at all.
And I mean, we saw in the Eskom... their financials, that at the end of it, they claim back the diesel levies. And you think, well, surely there's a way we can just bypass all of this and Treasury takes over the responsibility.
Yeah.
In the same way that Treasury used to buy the aeroplanes for SAA. They used to do the acquisitions. It wasn't left to SAA. The scale of the fraud that we're seeing, and the figures that have been quoted here, about 7 Rand per kilowatt hour, versus 1 Rand 20, we've got to do everything to stop running the gas turbines.
Yeah. All right, David, thank you. I wasn't aware of that about SAA. David and Klaberga, appreciate the time. 086 000 2032. Interesting. Voice notes coming through as well this morning.
Fellow SFM listeners, good morning. My name is Tulani Nzima in Grootes On. Stephen, I do not know what is Isaac saying from City Power. It doesn't make sense that since they took over, now electricity would go from 8 to 10, come back for 2 hours, then 12 to 4, 12 to 2, and then come back for 2 hours. That doesn't make sense. You cannot even plan your day, because if you're running a business, how are you going to work with 2 hours intervals? What are these people going to be doing, especially when it's happening during the course of the day? How are you supposed to be running business? Because it's not only the secluded business industrial areas where they can be able to take them offline. We also run business even within, for example, the CBD, your cheapest town, your Tefontein, your Bryanston, and all of that. I think they're just being utterly mad. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was surprised to hear the idea that, businesses are sort of resilient around this. I don't know if businesses feel that. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, just so that, there was no confusion or anything like that, I live in an area where people aren't sticking to the rosters. And of course, the thing is, if you aren't being load shed, no one's really going to complain, are you? It's not in your interest to complain. So you've got to look at that as well. All right, the number 086 000 2032.
SFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. The theme of the lecture is constitutionalism and upholding the rule of law in South Africa. Has corruption and malfeasance eroded the moral fabric of the democratic dispensation? The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation. Stay on top of all meaningful, top trending stories right here on SAFM. Leading the conversation.
19 minutes state where we were talking about the financial cost of crime a little earlier. A big part of it, organizations often called the construction mafia. There was a report in the Sunday Times that people who are sort of linked to known gang leaders literally walked into the offices of city officials and this said, we literally demand that you give us 500 million rands worth of contracts to some of the companies that are associated with us. And I mean, this is incredible. Imagine walking in to a council, people who are elected, by the way, and now saying, actually, you need to give us you need to give us your business. Aaron Hyman's an investigative journalist at Times Live. He's been looking at organized crime. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your audience.
What happened in this case? It seems that people basically, were they representing gangs or organized crime, literally walked into the City of Cape Town's offices and said, give us these contracts.
Yeah, so basically what had happened was, how we found out about the story is that there was a case of intimidation opened by a city official in February, right after this meeting happened. And allegedly what had happened is these individuals who were from an organization called Group 4 Developers, an organization which didn't exist then, basically said, look, there was the shooting in Delft with the city official Wendy Kloppers just a few days ago. Allegedly, they said the contracts need to go to Glomix, which is a company that is controlled by alleged 28's boss, Ralph Stanfield, and all city contracts. So all construction contracts relating to housing, relating to infrastructure, and all of the poorer areas around the city where there's a lot of gang control need to go to this company. Or the same thing that happened to Wendy Kloppers in Delft would happen at all the other construction sites around the city. These individuals, when we contacted them, denied that they made that claim. They claim that they purely asked that they were purely saying, look, there are these shootings, and we think we can mediate between the city and the gangs, so that from what it sounded like is that they said, give the contracts to Ralph Stanfield, and maybe these things will stop. That's what they say. So we give them the benefit of the doubt, I guess.
It's a classic protection racket, isn't it? And we've seen such a big rise in extortion, particularly in places like Khayelitsha. The police since then, have they done anything with this? And we know the Western Cape provincial government has complained about how much money it spends protecting building sites. We've seen assassinations in KwaZulu-Natal of people who run building sites being killed, it would seem, by these mafias. I mean, the problem clearly is growing, and these groups are growing more organized.
Yeah, so the police have arrested Ralph Stanfield. They arrested him towards the end of September, and he is still behind bars at the moment. And just to put it into context, there seem to be just a handful in the Western Cape, a handful of rackets that are well organized enough and strong enough to be able to outgun each other, basically, and outgun the police or the city to secure these sorts of contracts for them or their associated companies. And Ralph Stanfield's organization is allegedly one of those organizations. There's another one that's controlled by a very prominent organized crime figure who I won't mention here because I haven't asked him for his comment. But they've been basically moving from drug dealing, allegedly, and your sort of normal gang activity, and this is happening across the country. And they need some way to launder that money. So the next logical thing for them was getting in on these massive government tenders. Now, if you have a legitimate company that is getting these tenders and funneling vast amounts of money through these tenders, then suddenly you're washing a lot of your ill-gotten gains. So the problem for the police is that the construction mafia type of things, and this is what we try to point out in our story, it's extremely asymmetric. You've got it's not just. So what happened in some of these cases, you would have shootings consistently at these construction sites, say a housing, a site for low-cost housing development. You'll have constant shootings by a known gang, so a 28th affiliated gang, and then the next thing you get approached by these organizations, the likes of which we wrote about here, who seem to not be affiliated to the gang boss themselves, but they're saying, in the interest of peace, let's let this gang boss and his companies, which are legitimate companies, get the contract and finish the contract. So the police have arrested Ralph Stanfield, but they've yet to bring this case and these charges against him.
Aaron, thank you very much indeed. Aaron Hyman, investigative journalist at Times Live. So many more things to talk about there. Thank you. Steve on the line from Tshwane. Steve, hi. You've been listening to this. Good morning.
Yes, how are you?
All right, go for it.
But sometimes I fail to understand really. These things are simple. We cannot deal with this crime if there are still some people out there who glorify these thugs. Somebody comes to the municipal offices, he talks all those things. You just arrest that people, call the police, have a task team on standby. Yeah. Because we always know that they come every day. Well, how difficult is it? Have people on standby always. When these people come, you call them, they arrest them. Simple.
Yeah. No, Stephen Swanep, thank you. Bron in Hyde Park in Joburg. Hi, Bron.
Hey, Stephen, it's Grant.
Oh, Grant, sorry.
I even explained to the guy, like a SASA Grant, but just Grant.
Yes,
Stephen.
Grant. Sorry, Grant.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Stephen, what's that saying about one person's criminal is another person's freedom fighter kind of thing? With regards to Ralph Stanfield, yes, they are breaking every law possible. But District 6 was taken in the exact same manner, and all the land, all the valuable land in Cape Town was taken buy guys with arms, with more arms than the locals. You know, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying it's a hell of an irony that the land is being now like restolen from those who stole it. Essentially.
Well, I mean, the people who are suffering here, Grant, are not, rich white people whose ancestors may have stolen the land. They're poor people living in Khayelitsha. And I would also suggest that as a country, we went to elections and people elected political parties and said we're going to live under the rule of law, and it's up to the political parties that we elect to change the law. So if you want to take back land that was stolen, change the law rather than using violence,
Stephen,
which Ralph Stansfield
Stephen, I agree. But, Stephen, in saying that, people, there was always going to be a criminal element in this. There was always going to be. I'm not cheering it on. I'm not in favor of it. But yeah, it's just, as I say, one person's criminals and another person's freedom fighter.
Grant, I don't know. I mean, you're probably not alone, but I don't know. I think that might be taking, whataboutism a little too far. Yeah. Okay. But Grant, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Grant from Hyde Park. Mpo in Cape Town. Hi, construction mafias, Mpo.
Yes, Stephen. For me, I think it's about high time that these people who go into townships and take money from small businesses, now they are going to the government to ask for this money, to the city and all that things. It's about high time that our SAPS and all the crime intelligence, they must not handle these things with soft gloves, because now it's going to them now. I mean, the people who are in charge of the high offices. How about the people who are running small businesses in the townships where they get to pay protection fees and all that other stuff? Now it's getting to the high offices, right? So they have to act and make sure that they take decisive actions, because we just talk about it, we hear week in, week out, but there's no action that we can say is tangible, that we can even refer to say so and so was arrested because they did this and this.
Yeah,
we only
nothing
talk
happens.
about it, but nothing happens. I mean, next week we're going to speak about it again, Steve, and nothing happens,
No, sure. All right, I'm Paul in Cape Town. I think you're right. Moses in Bramley. Hi, Moses.
Happy Monday, Stephen.
And you.
Stephen, this construction mafia, it shows exactly that we are a lawless country. We are a mafia state. We are a banana republic, because we've got leadership that has lost touch with the citizenry. Because you cannot have people who can brazenly go into government official and demand this, Stephen. This is. You cannot explain this. And these guys are living large. That doesn't even have an impact in their life. Their pockets are fully loaded. They don't care about people anymore.
Yeah.
We cannot allow this, Stephen, because they've delegated. Look at the NSFAS. Children are no longer getting their money because they've delegated this thing to people who are aligned to actually increase their pockets, and children are suffering.
Yeah.
We cannot allow this. We need to remove these African national criminals.
All right, Moses.
They are not helping anyone.
Yeah.
But it's time. It's time next year, when we go to the polls, we must go there with our mind made up that we need to remove these people. Because sooner we'll be looking at each other when we are no longer having a country of our own.
All right, Moses on the line from Bramley. Strong views there. In a moment, Thomas from Newcastle wants to respond to Grant's comments about Ralph Stanfield. 8 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Couple of crash delays to try and avoid if possible. One around Joburg's Mike 1 at Killarney. This collision near 11th Avenue. Traffic very heavy from Gold Reef City. So if you're coming in from the south on your way to Santa, there's a whole pile of traffic to work through there. Also, a collision on the N1 South coming from Allendale, coming from Midrand and wanting to turn down to Four Ways in Sunninghill. That crash inside the Buccleuch interchange. So it's effectively N1 South Midrand onto the N1 South towards Four Ways. Very busy on that section as well. Main Road out of Lone Hill into Bryanston. That's a big queue. And the N4 driving into Pretoria, the Emma Flanny Highway with the crash at Watermeyer Street. Still backing up traffic, Pretoria bound or Hatfield bound if you like. Now, Durban, major delay alert if you're anywhere around Spring Spaghetti Junction. You've got a combination of the roadworks, a couple of breakdowns, and a crash. Now, the crash is on the N3, just on the Durban side of Spaghetti Junction, so it's near Sherwood. And that N3, driving into the crash, is backed up as far as Paradise Valley from the M13. So if you're coming out of Pinetown, that's a heavy queue. And remember, if you avoid that and take the M13 through Westville, you're going to sit in some traffic around that bridge works over the N2. So that's all very heavy. And then you've got the N2 south from Queen Nandi, north from around about Cement Factory. So the N2, a lot worse than normal, driving into the roadworks at Spaghetti Junction and then driving through the ramps at 4 level into that N3 crash. So it's all very heavy there. M7 into Pinetown stays busy from Hunt Stepman side, and Cape Town stays very heavy coming out of Tableview this morning. Complicating matters, a crash on Coburg Road at Plattekloof Road. So if you're coming in from Dunoon or coming out the Bloberg Road towards Refinery, that's all very heavy. Collisions on the N1 inbound at Plattekloof, slow from Brackenfell, and a crash on the N2 inbound at Jan Smuts, still holding traffic coming in from the airport. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Thomas on the line from Newcastle as promised. You want to respond to what Grant said? Go for it.
Yes, Steve. Steve, sometimes we do say things and things happen and you can draw parallels. But I think on this one, Grant is misleading and probably is going to set up a fire that's burning for no reason. Because one, these guys are criminals. Back then it was the law. So we've changed that law that said Group Areas Act should exist. Now, if it says what is happening now, the criminality of taking over and demanding stuff outside the law, and you say it's typical to that, then you basically are pulling us away from reasoning, you're pulling us away from responding proper to genuine problems with genuine solutions. Because right now somebody's going to pick this up and then go on the whole rent race of apartheid and whatever, which has nothing to do with apartheid right now. This is just pure criminality, and politicians are involved. That is known. So he must just, help us on that. He has every right to draw lines on the old things and that, but we're trying to build a country here. We're trying to stop trouble here. So he mustn't be just putting a spark for the sake of putting a spark. He must think, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying he's not thinking, but yeah.
No, Thomas on the line from Newcastle, I hear you. There are lots of different ways to look at it, but I do think that the law matters, and the whole reason we have these processes and democracy is so that we can agree on solutions to things. Black economic empowerment is part of that, for example. 4 minutes to 8.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Do you have any cash on you at the moment? Do you have any cash rather than just your card or paying with your phone or something like that? More and more, I think people are moving away from cash. And the National Taxi Alliance now has a big initiative with an organization called SA Pay. Basically, it would allow you to pay for your minibus taxi trip without using cash at all. Theo Malele is the spokesperson for the National Taxi Alliance. Theo, good morning.
Good morning to you, and thanks for having me.
How does it work? I suppose your phone needs to use it, right?
Yes, you certainly do need to download the app from the App Store if you're using a smartphone. But it doesn't have limitations. You also can use your debit card, your SASSA card, and if you do not have any of those, you could still have a card that would be sold at taxi ranks. And we currently are busy talking to corporates such as retailers, ShopRite checkers, to ensure that we have it spread across the country, and we're talking to other corporates as well to ensure that the availability of these cards is easy.
Okay, so it goes completely cashless. Is there a high, and this can get quite technical, is there a high transaction cost? This person receiving the cash likes to receive the cash because it's cash and it's free. But when you use a credit card, for example, there's a transaction cost. Is that a problem with your industry?
Oh, obviously. Obviously, there are transactional costs. We have negotiated and kept that below 5 Rand. Whether you have 1 or 50 vehicles, you just pay one capped fee. And this is thanks to Absa Bank. It's one of the corporates that has joined forces with us to ensure that the collection of these funds gets done on a daily basis and ensure that these funds are transferred to owners' accounts by 11:59 every day. And if you do have a ABSA account, then the transaction would be absolutely free.
If you're the owner of a taxi, I would imagine this is quite useful. You would then be able to check how much money was taken in, how much was spent on petrol and all of that. You'd have a record, a proper record of of how much money came in and how much money went out.
Absolutely. In real time, you can check on your finances as they transact. And this opportunity is only privileged to your good self as an owner. The driver would not have control over that cash, but it would reflect on the driver's dashboard, but it goes directly into the owner's wallet.
I'm sorry to be chatterig, Theo, but that applies to SARS too, right? They'll be able to see it?
You're not being chacharach. You're being proudly South African, and we are grateful for that. No. That it goes without saying. Look, even when we do our applications for operating licenses, one of the requirements is for us to present a tax clearance certificate. So every South African's details are contained at SARS. So there's no way of dodging that one.
All right, Theo Malele, thank you very much indeed from the National Taxi Alliance. Always good to talk. All right, lots to come in the next little while. Don't forget, we'll focus on Sudan from 8:30. With SFM leading the conversation, it's 8 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, EFF leader speaks of members assisting Magashule's new party and Kimberley residents frustrated by lack of water supply. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building Magashule's party, the African Congress for Transformation in Metsimaholo. Malema was addressing party members in Bloemfontein. He says the party is hard at work and will be ready to replace them. He says they are not dismayed by the behavior of members whom he called opportunists as they are on their way out. Kimberley's Sol Plaatje municipality is still battling to fully restore water supply around the city. The municipality, which is plagued by constant water cuts, embarked on an unplanned shutdown on Wednesday morning last week, leaving many residents stranded and frustrated. Parched residents who were desperate for water took to the streets, burning tires and blockading roads around Khalishiwe Township on Thursday. The municipality says some areas have been receiving water since Friday night, but is still battling to fully restore supply in all areas. Municipal spokesperson is Thabo Mutibi.
Currently, 2 of our Newton reservoirs have reached levels enough for pumping for residents of Kimberley CBD and surrounding areas. This, as we are seeking to stem depletion owing to high temperatures and the demand heightened by the emergency shutdown. Progress made, we will once again operate on 2 pumps that are fully functional. Water tankering remains in force in some areas.
The Mpumalanga government has called on law enforcement officials in the province to do all they can to keep residents safe this festive season. Premier Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane led a delegation which included the Provincial Police Commissioner Smakaling Manamela and government officials to the launch of the Safer Festive Season campaign in Middleburg. Manamela says over 11,000 police officers will be visible in every corner of the province.
The safety of the community of Mpumalanga is secured. We are up in the streets. We are going to be policing all the hotspots. So far, we have identified about 28 hotspots, key point areas that are giving us challenges. You are talking to your airport, you are talking to your N4. We're also experiencing a lot of assault GPH. That also at some times are resulting to murder. We're also going to be experiencing a lot of movement.
The trial against a woman accused of being the mastermind behind the murder of her husband is expected to resume today in the High Court in Thohoyandou, Limpopo. The accused, Ntanganetseni Remaranze, is accused of hiring 4 hitmen to kill her husband, Azifanele Mutau. Mutau, who was a businessman, was shot and killed in an execution style on Valentine's Day in 2019. Michael Magungo reports.
The trial against Nemaranje and the co-accused Chivangwa Mudau, Chiliro Mateka, and Takara Nemtandani was postponed earlier this month for finalization of admission statements by the accused. The fourth man who was hired in the killing has since passed away. The accused have been remanded in custody. Michael Makungo, SABC, Polokwane.
And finally, the governor of the U.S. state of Vermont, Phil Scott, says the shooting of 3 students of Palestinian descent should not incite more hate and divisiveness. Police say the 3 men, all aged 20, were visiting the city of Burlington for the Thanksgiving holiday, and they are not critically injured. The BBC's Shingai Nyoga reports.
Burlington police responded to a shooting at 6:30 local time Saturday night. The victims included 2 U.S. citizens and a resident. The authorities said that without speaking, a man opened fire on the trio. They're looking into a possible motive, but say 2 of the victims were wearing the black and white keffiyeh Palestinian scarves. A search for the suspect is underway. The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, ADC, called on authorities to investigate this as a hate crime, believing that the men were targeted because they are Arab.
Recapping your top story, EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC SG Eis Magashule in building his party, the African Congress for Transformation in Metsimaholo. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 8:30.
Luyanda, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462. For a quote, OutSurance, where you always get something out. Is your cash flow tighter than a squeeze through the Kango caves? Make your financial journey smoother by asking OutSurance to save you money on your car insurance premium. If they can't, ask them to pay you 500 Rand cash. That's monthly savings, or 500 Rand cash. If they can't, beat your premium. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for an OutSurance car insurance quote. That's out to 38462. OutSurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, soccer, Mamelodi Sundowns no longer top of the DStv Premiership standings, and in MotoGP, it's Francesco Bagnaia who bags the Valencia victory. All this and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
A couple of big delays coming in from the south, moving north into Joburg. A crash on the Mike 1 at 11th Avenue. Traffic remains heavy this hour from Gold Reef City. So there's a really big queue coming up through Boysons to Crown and Parktown on your way to Sandton, although it just shows signs that it may be starting to ease. Also crash on the N3 north at Elands, at Heldenay. So coming through from Elands, passing Cement Factory, that run through remains busy. The N1 south fairly heavy this morning from Brockfontein Interchange down to New Road. And then a crash at the bottom of the N1 as you link through Clue towards the Four Ways area. Durban is where it's at in terms of major traffic delays. There's all sorts of problems along the N2 and N3 corridors around Spaghetti Junction. You've got big queues coming south from Queen Dundee Drive into Spaghetti Junction. Big queue going north from the Cement Factory up through 4 Level. You've got a really big backlog from Paradise Valley on the M13 driving into Spaghetti Junction and then down to Sherwood. It's a combination of the roadworks on the N2 plus the crash scene on the N3 inbound at Sherwood that's got all that traffic backed up this morning. Cape Town, very heavy still out of Tableview with a crash on the Coburg Road at Plattercliff Road if you go out towards the refinery. It's slow. And the collision on the N2 inbound at Jan Smuts Drive is finally being cleared. The N2 stays busy from the airport through to Hospital Bends. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 after 8, good morning with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. All right, we're talking about construction mafia, the sort of brazenness. You heard Grant's call earlier suggesting that this was linked to violence in the past. You heard, of course, the response there as well, to that. I think that there are different things here. I think one is it does just tell you about what's happened with sort of law. I don't like the phrase law and order. It reminds me of two things. One's a television program. The other is sort of what people used to call policing during the apartheid era, and I'm sort of old enough just to remember that phrase, the law and order minister. I kind of don't try and steer away from it if I can. But I do think there's an important question around law and the rule of law, so let me use that phrase rather. We'll talk a bit more about that. We will talk about a disease and that seems to be changing, and we'll actually speak to someone who's done really important research, Professor Tulio de Oliveira. You may remember him, of course, from the pandemic. He's done such important work on that. Keep the calls coming as well on 086 000 2032.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Churchill on the line from Mthatha. Churchill, hi, good morning. The construction mafia, go for it.
Good morning, Stephen. Stephen, I think the first thing that I must start with, I must say that let's not blame the ANC. The time has come. The wheels are starting to fall. They run out of ideas. Look, Stephen, I don't know how much time or is it going to take us to revisit our constitution, especially on the issue of crime. Why? Because I feel, and I strongly feel, that even our criminal justice system is overwhelmed because of our constitution. You look at countries generally in Africa that don't have the resources that we have, that are doing far much more better in managing crime. And because of our constitution, where everybody's got rights, we're attracting everybody from all over to come and commit crime in this country. If you look at the construction mafia, look at these people, look at the cases that are being built. They're not watertight cases. They go to court. These people come back to the same communities. And those people who are whistleblowers or who actually lay charges against these people, they feel vulnerable. Then it collapses the whole thing. So I think we need to give some tips to the criminal justice system, and that can only happen through our revisiting of the constitution of this country.
I don't know. I mean, I hear you, but isn't it actually about a failure of policing? I mean, isn't it about increasing the budget of the VIP protection unit and decreasing the amount of money we spend on the NPA? Isn't it about the choices people have made under the constitution rather than the constitution itself?
Yeah, that's why I say we need to revisit the constitution. Because let's look at these other constitutions in the different countries, just generally in the Southern Hemisphere. Those people, those countries are doing far much more better in managing crime than ourselves.
Yeah. Well, look, I hear you, Churchill. I mean, there are lots of differences as to why that might be, but I hear the point that you're making. All right, Churchill and Mthatha, thank you. I mean, I know that I think there are going to be plenty more calls, by the way, for people to change the constitution. For the moment, I'm sort of not convinced, but I mean, it's not my view that necessarily matters. So your view on that, you may well agree with Churchill. 10 after 8.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, it's a sort of period where we spend 16 days talking about activism against violence against women and children. It's sort of part officially of the United Nations campaign, which is why it has the title that it does. But every year we end up having the same sort of conversations. I noticed yesterday, just sort of almost picking up from what Churchill was saying, Deputy President Paul Mashatile was saying that we need to be sort of harsher on people who are found to be involved in gender-based violence. We're talking, of course, really about men attacking women. Lifeline has suggested now that there should be a sort of memorandum. There was a march in Cape Town over the weekend that says doctors and medical staff must report cases of statutory rape. So the idea would be to try and enforce that kind of reporting. And we know in the past, though, that often what happens is that a teenage girl under the age of 16 won't report a case or won't tell people who, sometimes the father of their child is. Pina Kodasang is the CEO of the Soul City Institute. Pina, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Do you support the idea that would make it mandatory for doctors or medical staff to report cases of statutory rape?
Because, and we need to understand the chain of events. When a teenager presents, the first place they would present at is a clinic or a hospital when they are pregnant. So in that chain, the first person to receive this child should, because we all have a duty to report, be able to lodge a case to say, I'm seeing a 10-year-old here who's pregnant and by law this is a violation. So this person must be reported, right? So when they report this 10-year-old, then she must disclose who the father is so that we can determine whether statutory rape has happened or not. And in fact, a 10-year-old being pregnant is statutory rape. So there's nothing to determine except that we are then reporting an issue. And what that will do, Stephen, is that it will help in capping the number of cases. Because right now, it's just happening. No one is being accountable. There's no one being held to account for that. And so we need everybody's involvement in getting to the end result, which is to reduce these number of cases or to bring to book those who are perpetrating violation against these young girls.
So, I agree with everything you say in terms of the aim of it. At the moment, when cases of statutory rape are reported, do the police actually do anything from there? What I'm trying to get to is we want to increase the number of convictions for statutory rape. We would need to show that cases being reported now actually leads to people being held accountable legally. Is that happening now? If it's not happening now, just increasing the number of cases reported won't make much difference.
Unfortunately, the benchmark is very low, even across all rape cases, without necessarily isolating statutory rape. Our conviction rate right now is sitting at less than 8%, right? So that doesn't give a good picture. It doesn't motivate to say, if we report these things, we know for sure something will be done. But it doesn't mean we mustn't do it. We must be intentional. We must push for conviction to go up, and we must push for reporting. So the more we report and the more we convict, I think the more we are then solving the problem.
So what happens, and I know this has happened many times, and we've spoken to the South African Council for Educators around this, that people will know that the girl is pregnant. They will suspect it's an older person, and sometimes the teenager, she won't say who the father is. She won't say who the person is. And in other cases, she'll tell the family who the person is, and that person will pay them off. It's a terrible story, but they'll pay them money so that they don't report it. And this gets us to quite difficult territory.
It does, and education around gender norms and how we deal with behavior pertaining to the gender norms in societies is something we need to deal with. It has been normalized, this thing of rape is normalized, where an older man can have a relationship with a younger woman because of the provision, the material provision, the money that is being received, sometimes knowingly to the parents of the child. That this child is dating this older person, but because they are getting money, they look the other way. We also need to engage traditional leaders around how they handle cases like this. Because in some communities, the case will be presented, Korong at the chief's crawl, and they decide that you must haula, pay damages, as they call it, with a cow, with a goat, which again enables perpetration. Because if somebody has enough cows, they will rape as many young women, knowing that all I will do is pay off the damages. So we need to be very intentional, very strict, apply the laws and not, work around the laws, but apply the laws as they are stated in our constitution and also in the different bills that exist.
Pina Kodasang, thank you. CEO of the Soul City Institute you're with SAFM. In fact, the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo, has just phoned in. He's been listening to this conversation. Deputy Minister, good morning. Your view on this?
Stephen, I'd like to start by saying we need to really put this matter for debate and dialogue, in the sense that some of us have been advocates of sugar daddies abusing children. It's almost abuse, and also related to gender-based violence, abuse, and having unequal relationships in this space, and saying this child should do what I wish because I'm older, I'm providing other resources. That part is really totally out of order, and we need to deal with it. But a shortcut that says healthcare workers must report immediately they see an 11-year-old. You know what's going to happen, Stephen? The starting point is that a teenage pregnancy is a very difficult pregnancy. It's a high-risk pregnancy. We as healthcare workers, we want to really attend to those children and make sure that they survive post-delivery and reduce deaths of these teenagers when they are pregnant. Now, if I were not to have access to Cindy tomorrow because Gladys came today and I reported, many other young girls who are not going to come in and report coming in next week, and therefore we lose a significant number. So rather, let's find another way and debate it, rather than to say a shortcut is to say healthcare workers report, and then any other girl tomorrow will not come, because all those who reported, either they were forced to go and show who are these people, and then tomorrow, because those are the issues that we are saying. Let's not probably say it's a shortcut route. teenagers must then be reported by ourselves as healthcare workers, and then the case is done and it's dusted. It's not as simple as that.
It's also, for healthcare workers, you want to make sure people come to you. That's your job, is to care for them. The criminal justice system is a bit more complicated, but your job is to care for people, and you must make sure people come to you. The last thing we want is illegal abortions as well.
Because teenage pregnancy is a risky pregnancy. If there's anything I would like to do is to make sure that all those teenage mothers end in hospitals and are taken care of, because it's a risky pregnancy. Now, let's find a way of dealing with this matter other than to say, let's actually get the healthcare workers to report these issues and therefore discourage any other teenager who's going to fall pregnant next week, next year.
Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo, the Deputy Minister, thank you very much indeed. Deputy Minister of Health, hearing that conversation and phoning in to respond from Seoul City. Lizuko in Fourways, hi.
Hi, Stephen. I think you've touched on what I wanted to say. The primary of a healthcare is just to take care of the patient.
Yeah.
And there's a trust between the patient and the healthcare worker. The moment that trust is broken, you're opening up for illegal activities in terms of abortions. And also, I don't think these guys have really thought it through in terms of, it's just being lazy to say the responsibility of a doctor is to report. It's just a lazy thinking.
All right. Are you a doctor, Lizuko?
I'm in the healthcare sector.
Okay. Lizuko, thank you on the line from Fourways. Interesting views there, 19 after 8.
SFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
Life is full of challenges, and when they come your way, learn to whack your way through it.
Yeah.
My father and my mother were highly disciplined people. I remember him saying, I have decided to deny myself whatever others are enjoying, to accumulate enough money so that any of my children who wants to study would have the resources available to study so that they don't have to suffer the way I have had to suffer.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation. Open the Absa Cash Invest Tracker account and earn the best rates in the market, more than the top 10 money market funds' average returns. Enjoy unmatched advantages at an interest rate of 8.9% per annum. Plus, if you open your account today, you could win your share of 15 million rand in luxury travel experiences for two. Yes, you heard right. A trip for you and your partner. My Bank does that. Open yours today in less than 5 minutes on the banking app, at your nearest Absa branch, or consult your private banker or call 0860 111 515. Absa is an authorized FSP and a registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Score big with Diadora South Africa, and your soccer team could soon face your opponents in Diadora gear. Show off your love for the game and gear up for victory. Join the competition now for a chance to win a full soccer team kit, a goalkeeper kit, and accessories. All you have to do is follow at Diadora.SouthAfrica on Instagram. Tag your team and teammates in the comment section of our posts. The competition closes on the 30th of November at 2 p.m. T's and C's apply.
#We love it here.
This great initiative is supported by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Wow, finding out about my health has never been so easy. I just spoke to a nurse, and I also got to ask a doctor a question, and I didn't even have to leave my home. Want to download your COVID-19 vaccine certificate? The National Health Hotline nurses and agents can help on 0800 029 999. And you can also ask a doctor a health question on the Kiredi WhatsApp line on 060 019 0000. That's Kiredi on 060 019 0000.
Is your cash flow tighter than a squeeze through the Kango caves? Make your financial journey smoother by asking Outsurance to save your money on your car insurance premium. If they can't, ask them to pay you 500 Rand cash. That's monthly savings or 500 Rand cash if they can't beat your premium. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for an Outsurance car insurance quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
I don't know if you've heard of the virus chikungunya. I don't think I've been pronouncing that correctly. Chikungunya, which has now been identified in Senegal. It's a new strain of it, and this is having an impact on how actually the vaccine is changing. It's how the virus is changing. It's actually spread by particular mosquitoes. It causes a fever and long-lasting musculoskeletal pain. In other words, it hurts your muscles and your bones for many, many years. And of course, it moves around through parts of Africa, but other provinces as well. Professor Tulio D'Oliveira is director at the Centre for Epidemic Response and Innovation at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor D'Oliveira, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Stephen, and good morning to all your listeners.
This is quite a serious virus. What kind of research are you doing on it? What are you trying to follow up on about this virus?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. So what's happened, we are supporting multiple African countries. What it means, when they see a new outbreak happening, we will engage with them. We have trained 441 fellows from 52 African countries, and we will send them reagents to characterize these new viruses or bacteria. You may remember that you talked with me a few months ago about the cholera epidemic in Malawi that we helped to characterize. And this one is a new epidemic that is happening from chikungunya virus. That's a virus that's transmitted by mosquito, such as dengue. We also have other parasites that are transmitted by mosquito, like malaria. And unfortunately, with expanding climate change, the area of the mosquitoes are increasing. And then we are seeing more and more outbreaks of mosquito-transmitted pathogens that sometimes can have some serious health repercussions.
Are there any ways to stop the virus from spreading? Are there any vaccines?
Okay, so the way to spread virus or parasite spreading by mosquitoes is to control the mosquito population. That's the first way, which is easily said than done. For example, I'm here in Stellenbosch and I'm already have to be sleeping with mosquito nets. And the second one, it is with therapeutics or vaccines. This means that even if the virus keeps transmitting, at least cause less damage on the population. And the good news is that we have just been approved a couple of weeks ago, the first chikungunya vaccine. The bad news is that we do not know how this vaccine will work on these new lineages or variants.
Is it a virus that changes quite quickly? Do you get more variants quickly like we saw with COVID, or does it sort of only happen over a slower period of time?
So that's what viruses do. Viruses evolve. So, for example, we saw with COVID, very fast evolution. We see with HIV evolving to become resistant to therapies. And the chikungunya is a very interesting evolution pathway. So, for example, this one, it is a strain of chikungunya that have been detected by our colleagues at RSF in Senegal with our support that come from the sylvatic cycle. What it means? The sylvatic cycle is the ones that happen at the forest, and in addition to humans, also use non-human primates or different species of macaques and monkeys. And that's what have happened. So in one area of Senegal called Kétougou, that's in the southeast, they had the highest increased temperature in the last few years, and that proliferate the mosquito population, and then this virus jump from the sylvatic cycle, what it means needing a small primate, to now being transmitted just between mosquitoes and humans. And unfortunately, that's what pathogens do, especially the ones amplified by climate change, which many of them will happen in Africa. And that's a sad story because Africa only contributed 4% to the global emissions of CO2, but is the one suffering most from climate change and these new epidemics.
Professor Tulio de Oliveira, thank you, Director of the Centre for Epidemic Response and Innovation at the University of Stellenbosch. A lot more to come on that, I'm sure. 28 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, this is a question that I'm too bored to answer. Who's on the top of the PSL table? Mamelodi Sundowns?
No.
No!
No! Imagine. They've been dethroned by Cape Town City, but they do have 5 games in hand. Now, Cape Town City had a 1-0 win over Golden Arrows. So the Cape Town City moving a point above Masandawana with 25, but having played 5 more games than the Brazilians. Golden Arrows, they stay on 20 points in 4th. And that's from 12 matches. Cape Town City will next be in action in a local derby against Stellenbosch. That's on Friday, the 8th of December. Kaizer Chiefs are into 6th place. Pirates only 9th. Now, let's go to the majority of the South African United Rugby Championship teams fired back in what was a largely dominant weekend with only the Stormers losing. The Lions overran Zebra 61-19 at Ellis Park. The Bulls, they thumped Connacht 53-27 at Loftus, and the Sharks thrashed the Dragons 69-14 at Kings Park. And the Stormers losing their 4th straight away game, going down 31-24 to Cardiff. Tennis action, a dominant Yannick Sinner outclassing Australia's Alex de Minaur to help Italy secure their first Davis Cup title for 47 years. Here's Sinner.
I felt quite good today, not only today but in the last month, and this is a really important win for me, and I think for the whole team and Italy together.
Motorsport, in a race that saw 1/3 of the field crash out, Francesco Bagnaia stood on the top step of the podium, retaining his World Championship status as title rival Jorge Martin crashed out. Qatar GP winner Fabio Do Gian Antonio finished second on track, but a 3-second post-race penalty for a tyre pressure infringement demoted him to 4th place. This promoted Johan Zarco to 2nd and South Africa's Brad Binder to 3rd. Here's the world champion, Bagnaia.
It was quite difficult at the start, thinking about to use the number 1 and regain the title. So finally did it again. It's fantastic. Number 1 was amazing to ride on, and finally did the maximum goal possible. It's amazing. It's fantastic.
More sport, we're here for you on SAFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. The crisis in Sudan, that's next. You're with SFM leading the conversation at 8:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, DA leader John Steenhuisen is expected to conduct an aerial oversight of the Durban harbour and surrounding ocean today. Steenhuisen's visit follows a cargo backlog crisis at Transnet Durban Port. EFF leader Julius Malema says the party is aware of its members who are working with former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in building his party, the African Congress for Transformation, in Metsimaholo. Malema was addressing party members in Bloemfontein. And police have arrested a 21-year-old student in connection with the murder of a teacher in Parkmore, Johannesburg. Kirsten Clates was killed last month while jogging at George Lear Park in Parkmore. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the Mike 1 through Joburg Central remains busy this morning, just under pressure from Gold Reef City through to about sort of Empire Road, St Andrews, just after an earlier crash in the Killarney area, backed everything up. The N1 staying fairly busy. It's okay through Pretoria, M1 South okay through. There's no roadwork disruption to really worry about, but from Bruckfontein interchange down to New Road, it stays fairly busy. Durban, recovery mode through Spaghetti Junction after a crash on the N3 at Sherwood. That is being clear, but boy, it's left some traffic. The N2 queuing from Cement Factory territory all the way up into 4 level. There is a broken down truck in the mix this morning, as well as the roadworks, and the N3 coming inbound under pressure because of the earlier crash, because of the delays going north on the N2. The N3 struggling to get in with a backlog that extends right back to Paradise Valley. Cape Town, Coburg Road, option passing the refinery coming out of Tableview stays heavy. A crash there this morning, Plattercliff Road, Coburg Junction. So that's pushing traffic back to Killarney. It's also holding traffic coming out from the Tableview area. Bloberg Road still under pressure from Gee Road. You might want to take the exits out through the Bayside Junction. Looks a lot better. Marine Drive and West Coast this morning. And there's been a crash on the N2 before Bunga Avenue. So traffic on that busy run through. It's about the third collision we've had this morning. Traffic stays heavy from Robert Sobukwe Road as you head in towards central Cape Town. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
I reflected on the lives of these men and said, Steve Biko could have been a medical doctor. Aubrey Mokwape, they could have been medical doctors, but for the sake of me and many others, they chose a path of justice. What challenges me all the time is there are multitudes out there who are unemployed, who are uneducated, people who from time to time go to bed without food. This is an opportunity to use this privilege, to use this position for the advancement of the cause of justice, because there is so much more that still needs to be done out there.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation. Mediated conversation on SAFM.
26 minutes now to 9 the time. Good morning. The crisis in Sudan is now reaching a point where some aid agencies are warning it could turn into what they call a full-scale ethnic civil war, with entire communities that could now be at risk. In the last few days, there have been clashes between different groups. Some of them have been described, and I think this is difficult terminology, as sort of Arab groups or non-Arab groups, but formally the fighting is between the main army of Sudan and the Rapid Support Forces. Another group called the Joint Protection Forces also seems to be involved in these clashes. The backdrop to the crisis in Sudan is complicated. It involves the former dictator, Omar al-Bashir, losing power and being overthrown. A military government took over. There were civilian protests against that government, and then this conflict broke out between these two main groups, the army and the Rapid Support Forces. So then, how did this start? Is ethnicity a factor in all of this? What's happening to ordinary people in Sudan? This is your mediated conversation this morning. First, you'll hear from Professor Gilbert Kariagala about the population of Sudan and the causes of this conflict. He is currently director of the Center for the Study of the United States, but of course has focused on many areas. Then you'll hear about what's happening to ordinary people in Sudan. Donatella Rovera is the Senior Crisis Response Advisor for Amnesty International. And finally, the possible implications of all of this. Faith Mabera is a senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. We start then with Professor Gilbert Kariagala. Professor Kariagala, good morning to you, sir, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Sudan has a long history, a history at one point of being ruled by the British and Egyptian governments. What is the ethnic makeup of Sudan, and is that important in understanding what is happening now?
The ethnic makeup of Sudan is very complex. I think the key issue to understand is that the dominant groups around Khartoum, which is the capital city, into the border with Egypt are essentially of Arab origin. But then if you go down towards the south and the west, I guess in the west there are also Arab groups, particularly in Darfur, where there was a big civil war from 2003, and that war actually hasn't ended. And then the further you go down to the south, bordering now the current South Sudan, which used to belong to Sudan, are more African. And then on the eastern side, it's also much more divided. There are Arab groups there, but there are also groups that are ethnically linked to Ethiopia and Eritrea. So it's a very complex ethnic mix. And then if you go up to the Port Sudan, which is more to the northwest, northeast, then you have a mixture of Arabs and Africans, but a lot of those are actually more Egyptian, of the Arab origin. because it's very close to the Red Sea.
Okay, so then the two main groups that we see in the fighting now, the National Army of Sudan and the Rapid Support Forces, do these groups represent people of different ethnicities, or is it more complex than that?
More complex, but I think the clear picture is that the Sudan Army, which is represented by Mr. Burhani, is actually the dominant Arab group, the one that I was talking about around Khartoum, the capital city, into Omdurman, the old city, into the border with Egypt. Those are the real Arabs. But then the complication is the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, came out of Darfur. And Darfur is also very, very, very divided between the Arabs there and the Africans. But the current leader who is battling Mr. Burhani is called Mohammed Hamdani Daglo. And he's also of Arab origin, but from Darfur. Okay. So that is the complication. It's Arab, but from Darfur. But the Sudanese leader, the army, is Mr. Burhani is also Arab from Central Sudan, if we could put it that way.
I suppose it's a bit like having someone with the surname Dlamini could be a Zulu Dlamini or a Swazi Dlamini.
Precisely. So the struggle is actually about power. It's not ethnicity is only coming in for mobilization purposes. For instance, Mr. Daglo from Darfur is now even rallying non-Arabs from Darfur against the central government. So that's really the complicated element. But down the road, the Darfurians, Africans and Arabs don't see eye to eye, or rather that's why there was a civil war. Particularly a civil war that was stoked from the center by the Arab government here.
Okay, so that was going to be obviously the next question. What are they really fighting over? Is it about just control of resources and power, or is there any sort of ethnic history to this conflict?
There is really no ethnic history to it. What it is that it's a delayed transition to democratic rule. When Mr. Bashir was overthrown in 2019, there was a compromise that civilians and the military were going to share power until election. That means until a democratic election. So part of the agreement was that the military was going to go back to the barracks and the civilians were going to take over. But 2 years into that transition, from 2019 to 2021, the two military leaders who are now fighting each other overthrew the transitional government because they didn't want elections to be held ultimately. So they overthrew the civilian government, the civilian transitional government, and then they took power. So 2 years later, 2023 in April, on the eve of their handing over power to civilians, they start fighting against each other. So it's a purely struggle for power arising out of the fact that these two military leaders and their supporters really don't want to give up power. And partly because they have accumulated a lot of resources, a lot of wealth. Sudan is a very rich country. So they were anticipating that if the civilian government takes power, it was actually going to marginalize them from power. They are no longer going to be the big men who they have been since, particularly since, because they worked under Mr. Bashir. They are very important. Mr. Daglo in Darfur, he was actually fighting for the central government in Darfur. And then, of course, Mr. Burhani has been a key leader in the military in Sudan. So the fight is about power, about resources, but also it's about avoiding a civilian democratic system in Sudan. So now that we are in a full-fledged war, there's no possibility that there's going to be a democratic transition anymore.
Is it going to, do you think, just remain between these two groups, or could we see other groups entering the fray or splintering off, and could it become a bit like the DRC war was at one point, where you actually have lots of different groups against each other?
Before the conflict arose in 2021, the military taking over, you had other groups that had been contesting power over ethnic lines and resource lines. Eastern Sudan has groups there that have been contesting for power, just like the South Sudanese. In fact, during the years of the civil war in the Sudan, Eastern Sudan was also on a tinderbox because there are groups there that don't like the central government. But again, Darfur is also an important component of it. So now when you have a collapse of the center, it reignites all these grievances by these other groups who have always, in fact, contested for power in Sudan, because Sudan is a huge country. And it has always been ruled from the center in Khartoum. There have not been any efforts to give power to local communities because the Arab government in Sudan always was afraid of secessionist movements like the Southern Sudan that led to the independence of South Sudan in 2011. So the problem is that there are now many groups that are coming up because they know that those people are fighting for power in Khartoum. This is the time for them to take advantage of the kind of vacuum that exists. And that is why you are going to see the proliferation of more groups contesting for power. And that's why it's a full-fledged civil war, actually. In April, people thought, this thing is just going to end very soon. They will reach a compromise and then go back to the negotiating table and begin to talk about what we do from now. But it's been almost going into more than 6 months, and it's a terrible situation happening in Sudan right now.
Professor Gilbert Kariagala, thank you very much indeed. Currently director at the Centre for the Study of the United States, but as you can hear, an expert on Sudan. 16 minutes to 9, continuing a mediated conversation about the crisis there. Donatella Rovera is the Senior Crisis Response Advisor for Amnesty International. Donatella, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning.
This fighting's had a huge impact on ordinary people. How many people have been displaced? What's happened to people who've had to leave their homes in Sudan?
Well, it's difficult to know the exact number of people who've been forced to leave their homes, but we're talking about several million. So it is today the biggest crisis in terms of displacement, in terms of the number of people who've been displaced over a short period of time. Obviously, there is millions who are displaced within the country simply because it is difficult and impossible for many to leave the country. So those, for the population of the region of West Darfur, for example, it is possible for them to reach Chad relatively easy. I'm saying relatively because it's not easy, but it's at least possible. For others who live in areas that are further away from borders with another country, they have no other choice but to, at best, move within the country, move to areas where there isn't fighting or where the fighting is less intense.
For people who are staying in Khartoum, are they able to get enough food? And is there food for people in Chad who've moved into Chad?
With Khartoum, obviously, insofar as we know, the majority of the population has left, but there are still people, and with difficulties, the basic necessities still can be found. With regard to Chad, the situation is dire because Chad is hosting hundreds of thousands of Sudanese from before this bout of violence, before this war, so from previous years, from 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And the situation, as I saw it when I was there, it was, I'm not saying this lightly, but it was one of the worst situation that I had seen in my working life of over 20 years working in conflicts across the world. Basically, people arriving from Sudan and finding literally not even a plastic sheet with which to cover themselves during the rainy season. So the situation for the refugee population in eastern Chad is extremely dire.
Sure. Is the United Nations, are you able to provide any aid? And obviously there's so many other areas that you need to help people as well. Is aid getting through to people in Sudan?
The United Nations and other organizations that work in the field of development and relief, obviously we at Amnesty International are not amongst them. We investigate war crimes and other abuses. But so United Nations agencies and aid organizations are able to provide aid, especially for those who are displaced within areas of Sudan where there isn't any fighting, as well as in neighboring countries. The reality, though, is that the humanitarian aid that is needed is just not, the funding just isn't there. The international community has not responded to these very, very serious crises in the manner that it should have. And therefore, the pledges for humanitarian aid are way below what is needed by the affected population.
Donatella Rivera, thank you. The Senior Crisis Response Advisor for Amnesty International. In a moment, Faith Mabira from the Institute for Global Dialogue on the situation in Sudan. 11 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Joburg starting to ease, especially the Mike 1. It was heavy this morning through Crown up in towards Killarney due to an earlier crash scene. But that's been cleared. Just a little bit of traffic from sort of Gold Reef City through to the Crown interchange is the backlog there. The N1 through Midrand, Old Joburg Road to New Road stays busy. And motorists driving to Pretoria, just a heads up, there's a big queue approaching Fountain Circle. If you're heading in through Monument Park, the sort of closer you get to the circle, the heavier that gets. Durban's had a bit of a nightmare Monday through Spaghetti Junction. Most of it easing, with the exception of the N2. You've got the roadworks near the M13 bridge and then a breakdown as well. So the N2 North stays heavy from the M7 and there are some problems getting in off the N3 coming in from Pavilion Mall. That stays busy approaching that off-ramp to the N2 for a turn north into that. Traffic, Cape Town stays busy on the N2 queues from around about Jakes Curville Drive, passing a crash on the side of the road before Bunga Avenue and then just stays busy through to Mowbray Main. M5 through Rondebosch up towards the N2 is busy and the N1 highway, no incidents but stays under pressure this morning from around about sort of Hill, Basson Drive, Paro territory, all the way over the elevated freeway. Marine Drive coming into that through Pardon Island is slow going. A little bit of load shedding around Woodstock and Pardon Island areas as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
When something is in the heart, you really don't need to be checking as if it was something that was designed to facilitate your appointment. One of the things that I promised the nation was to make sure that transformation happens, with a view to ensuring that work is somewhat evenly distributed among whites, black people, and both black and white women. That is the one responsibility among many that I have pursued with everything within my heart.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Rand Water is concerned about the significant increase of water consumption in its areas of supply. The increase in water consumption is putting severe strain on Rand Water's distribution network. To save water, please do not wash your cars with hose pipes. Use buckets. Water your garden with sprinklers between sunset and sunrise. Do not wash your pavements with hose pipes. Use brooms. Repair your leaking taps. Cover your swimming pools to avoid quick evaporation. Shower instead of bathing in a tub.
This message is sponsored by Rand Water in partnership with City of Joburg, City of Ekurhuleni, and City of Tshwane.
Open the Absa Cash Invest Tracker account and earn the best rates in the market, more than the top 10 money market funds' average returns. Enjoy unmatched advantages at an interest rate of 8.9% per annum. Plus, if you open your account today, you could win your share of 15 million rand in luxury travel experiences for two. Yes, you heard right. A trip for you and your partner. My Bank does that. Open yours today in less than 5 minutes on the banking app, at your nearest Absa branch, or consult your private banker or call 0860 111 515. Absa is an authorized FSP and a registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Manene namanenekazi.
Dove is not just gentle and moisturizing.
It took great care of the nation
During the Rugby World Cup France 2023. Dove rocks, just like the box.
Danko Unilever for your remarkable contribution to the momentous journey of global heroes.
Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation this morning about the situation in Sudan. Faith Mabira is a senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Faith, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to the listeners.
It does appear that this fighting is becoming entrenched. These two groups are not going to stop fighting easily. Is it possible for other countries to intervene here to try and stop this fighting? It would seem to be very difficult.
Yes, so what is increasingly coming to the fore is that we are likely to see establishment of areas of control by the two military factions. Essentially, this would mean that the country could possibly be split into hard zones of control. At the moment, we've seen the Rapid Support Forces led by Hemeti taking control of at least 3 of the 5 state capitals in Darfur, which is its historic power base. The Sudanese Armed Forces led by Burhan at the moment seem to control largely some areas around the capital, Khartoum, and a lot of the agricultural and industrial productivity states. Your White Nile, Blue Nile State, etc. They also increasingly are looking to establish a minimal presence in Port Sudan, making it in many ways the country's new de facto capital. So this is where it gets interesting, because in the event that Port Sudan now emerges as the SAF power base and de facto capital, this would then prompt the Rapid Support Forces to declare an alternative capital of their own. And then what we would have is reminiscent of the Libyan scenario. This idea where we have the breakup of Sudan potentially into 2 rival government administrations, and then that would obviously lead to a prolonging of the fighting and make it very difficult to resolve a conflict which was largely informed by a political military dispute coupled with elements of geopolitics and contestations of power and control in a rentier state. So this is what we are likely to see, yeah?
That would be a terrible scenario where you have the sort of Libyan scenario. It basically means strong men are entrenched, fighting is entrenched, there's no development at all. You see the collapse of the nation state in a way in that area.
Yes, and it's interesting because we see Sudan's positioning as a very vital link in an increasingly fragile region where it actually acts as a key nodal point, bringing together not only the violent geopolitics of the Red Sea region, but also of the Sahel states. So this is also important to bring up because Sudan is the 3rd largest producer of gold after South Africa and the Sahelian states, and this informs the political economy of the conflict. In fact, even with the establishment of Port Sudan, which is the only functioning sea-adjacent port in Sudan, we've seen that there's been continued export of its key exports, Gum Arabic, limited exports of livestock, and also imports of oil into the region. So when we see dominance of control over such strategic assets by one military group, then you see the continued impetus for fighting just to establish not only territorial control, but continued dominance over the country's resources, particularly the gold trade, which has been also a key driver of the political contestations.
We've seen, of course, the coups in West Africa. Could some of those countries fall prey to the kind of situation Sudan is in now? Different military groups fighting against each other, lines of control, that kind of areas of control, that kind of thing.
It's possible in the sense that I think a major determining factor in this case is the extent to which a state is able to not only establish rule of law and control over the monopoly of violence. Even in the case as in Sudan, where we've seen a fragmented security sector, then that scenario that you're positing is very much likely, because that would mean that there is you have a situation where a country is particularly awash with arms. You have a country where there is a breakdown in the rule of law, and yes, you're likely to see fragmentation and augmentation of various non-state armed actors taking advantage of the security vacuum and engaging in various localized sort of conflagrations across the various countries. But the Sudan case, I think, is interesting because the latest that we've seen is that there was an attempt to sort of inject a bit of life into the Jeddah talks led by the US and Saudi Arabia, but they've not been able to establish a ceasefire. What came out of it was just a loosely held sort of humanitarian pause to the fighting, but immediately a few days after that particular agreement, then we saw resumption of fighting. And fighting has been particularly vicious, as I said, in the epicenter, which is the Khartoum, Bari, Omdurman tri-state metropolitan area. But also, as even Prof. Kategala mentioned, and Donatella mentioned, there's been a spread into other areas. So this possibility of a splintering into hardened areas of control is becoming an impending reality as the war fights, which of course would have implications for conflict resolution perspectives, but also the idea that we would see various actors now, the regionalization of the conflict, with both local and regional actors taking advantage of that breakdown in safety and security and rule of law. So this is likely to lead to a prolonging of the fighting.
And Faith, very quickly, if you can, the other conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, if they weren't happening, would the rest of the world be putting more resources into trying to resolve what's happening in Sudan?
I think in this case, the short answer would be money follows where the power and the politics are. So if the interest, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, that the international gaze has been largely fixed on the war in Gaza. And this is particularly because of the high-stakes nature, the kind of narratives that seem to be attending that particular war. And interestingly, we've seen almost lessened international attention on the war in Ukraine. So it's also a dominance of not only attention, but a redirection of key political, diplomatic, and military wherewithal by powerful actors in the international order. They're sort of the ones who dictate where a lot of these resources are directed, because they obviously pursue a lot of their own agendas and interests. So it's a question of which one takes paramount importance through the prism and the purview of the very powerful actors in the system.
Faith Mabera, thank you. Senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Really appreciate the time. Donatella Rivera is the Amnesty International Senior Crisis Response Advisor. And starting us off today, Professor Gilbert Kadiagala, Director at the Center for the Study of the United States. Kathy is next from Mdu, Stanza, myself. Look after yourself. Paul, we will see you tomorrow. You're with SFM, leading the conversation, 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, DA leader to conduct oversight at Durban Port, and 21-year-old nabbed for murder at a Joburg suburb. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. DA leader John Steenhuisen is expected to conduct an aerial oversight of the Durban harbour and surrounding ocean today. Steenhuisen's visit follows cargo backlog crisis at Transnet Durban Port. Last week, the parastatal confirmed a backlog of about 70,000 containers. They say emergency containers are being prioritized. Nonjabulo Mdungwa Magamu reports.
The DA says the backlog at the Durban harbour threatens to damage South Africa's international goods trade and paralyze the retail economy ahead of